Now have the singing of O Canada, led by the Honourable Member for Nanaimo Ladysmith.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love, in all of us command, car t'embrasse porter l'épée, il sait porter la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée, les plus brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Order. Allard.
Order.
Statements by members. Declaration.
Statements by members.
Allard.
Order.
Député de
The Honourable Member for Rivière-du-Nord. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this government's record over the past session is simple. In Ottawa, if Quebec is to make progress, Quebec has to regress. We saw it with Muskrat Falls, a loan guarantee for Newfoundland to allow it to unfairly compete to sell hydroelectricity to Americans. We saw it with the peanuts granted to the cheese producers in Quebec, supposedly to compensate for the arrival of 17,000 tons of European cheese on the market. We saw it with C-29 when the Liberals voted to weaken Quebec legislation in terms of consumer protection. We saw it in their refusal to support Bombardier. With Ottawa, Quebec regresses. Luckily, Mr. Speaker, we are here and the Bloc will continue to denounce this government's scheming that hurts Quebec's interests. A government that deserves nothing more than a lump of coal under the Christmas tree. And yet, on this side, my colleagues and I wish all Quebecers a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and the same thing to all parliamentarians. But be ready, because when we come back, no more fun and games.
Député de Châteauguay.
Honourable Member for Châteauguay-Lacolle.
It is with great pleasure that I rise today to speak about the incredible Christmas spirit that can be found in my riding. Where do I begin? With the Santa Claus Parade in Saint-Rémy, old-fashioned concerts and festivities in Mercier, Châteauguay, and Saint-Isidore, or the numerous activities in Sainte-Clotilde, Napierville, and Néry, as well as every other town and village in my region. Mais j'aimerais...
But I also like to remind my colleagues and fellow citizens of the existence of many food and toy collection activities that occur during this period of sharing. I urge all residents of Châteauguay-Lacolle to support the organizations devoted to this cause, such as Action Famille de Sainte-Martine, the Comité d'entraide of Saint-Jacques-le-Mineur, Sourire Sans Fin of Saint-Rémy, and the Châteauguay Food Bank, which are all partners of Saint-Vincent de Paul.
This, Mr. Speaker, is the true spirit of Christmas.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton-Griesbach.
Mr. Speaker, it's beginning to look a lot like Christmas, but for many people in Edmonton-Griesbach, it's not going to be very jolly. It's the same throughout Alberta. Many folks are left out in the cold. Unemployment's almost 10%. People are bracing for a job-killing carbon tax, and EI benefits are running out. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals are being Grinches. Despite their out-of-control spending, they failed to create one single net new full-time job. Their ultra-green agenda has Albertans seeing red. My constituents deserve a government that keeps its word and bolsters the economy. I'll continue to stand up for those who want jobs, not welfare, who want pipelines, not pipe dreams, who want action, not broken promises. They deserve more than a Liberal lump of coal. That said, Mr. Speaker, I wish my constituents and all members of this House a very Merry Christmas and a happy, healthy New Year.
The Honourable Member for Calgary-Skyview.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our government has approved Trans Mountain Line 3 pipeline projects. These projects will generate significant economic benefits, including $4.5 billion in government revenues, money that can be reinvested in our healthcare, education, environment, and a clean energy future. The Trans Mountain and Line 3 projects will create more than 22,000 direct jobs. Mr. Speaker, we may come from different political parties with different perspectives, but I'm asking my Alberta Conservative colleagues to stop acting skeptical about getting these pipelines built. Our goal of bringing prosperity back to Alberta is the same. Their current attitude is hurting investment into our province and slowing recovery of jobs to Albertans. My Alberta Liberal colleagues and I offer to work with the members across the way to ensure the pipelines are built, the Alberta economy grows, and the environment is protected. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I wish everybody Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thank you.
Honourable Member for New Westminster Burnaby.
British Columbians remember 2015 well. They remember the promises that the Prime Minister and Liberal candidates made that Kinder Morgan would not be approved using Stephen Harper's methods and the pipeline would not be forced on BC without community support and the consent of First Nations.
That's right.
Now in 2016, the Prime Minister has betrayed British Columbians by breaking all of these promises. The Liberal Kinder Morgan pipeline makes a mockery of the government's pretension to combat climate change. It even destroys some value-added jobs in BC. I worked in an oil refinery and I've been ankle-deep in oil. I have a healthy respect for a substance that has to be treated with extreme caution at all times. But just one error by somebody in an important role could wipe out tourism for years in the Lower Mainland and the coast and wipe out our coastal fisheries for a generation. The Democrats have been clear. We will stand up against this betrayal of British Columbians. We will stand with First Nations, we will stand up for our coast, and we stand against the Kinder Morgan Trans Mountain Pipeline.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Member for Mississauga-Streetsville.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to congratulate the Brar family on launching the biographical book on S. Thurman Singh. He was a wounded British Punjabi veteran of World War I who after the war joined the non-violent fight for India's independence from British imperialism. He led many peaceful protests in Bombay and marched alongside Mahatma Gandhi during the famous Salt March of India. His turban distinguished him as a Sikh leading the protests. Sadly, the freedoms that he fought for were never realized during his lifetime. In 1975, his wife and family immigrated to Canada, and a land that echoed the values and freedoms he so desperately desired for his country of birth. His family is shaped by his integrity, his values, his courage and conviction. They add to the plethora of resilient and dynamic immigrants who enrich the fabric of Canada, a country that continues to embrace diversity. Thank you.
Honourable Member for Caribou, Prince George.
I have to say, Mr. Speaker, 2016 was one for the books. It's hard to believe that the holidays are once again upon us and another chapter is closed. Whether it was attending the 90th anniversary of the Williams Lake Stampede, doing the 22 push-up challenge with Shaolin monks on the streets of a historic gold rush town of Barkerville, or walking the full 24 hours in the Prince George Relay for Life for Cancer, or being present to witness the new Canadians taking the sacred oath of citizenship, this year has been a roller coaster of emotion. I'm so proud to be the Member of Parliament for Caribou Prince George, to serve and to represent the incredible families of my riding. And as we begin to unwind with our family and friends and loved ones over the coming weeks, and recharge and reflect on the year that has just passed, I want to take this moment on behalf of my family, Kelly, Cassie, Caitlin, Jordan, and Josh, to wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Joyeux Noël et bon.
Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for West Vancouver Sunshine Coast, Sea to Sky Country.
This weekend in Sechelt, on the traditional territory of the Sechelt people, the Sechelt Arts Council, the Mayor, and the School District Principal for Aboriginal Programs announced their plans for their Canada 150 celebration. Siyaya, Our Families, Our Stories. Sechelt elders, non-Indigenous early settlers, and young people are embarking on a year of storytelling through the support of professional artists. The Sechelt have a proud oral tradition. Post-contact settlers have proud stories too. Capturing these is a way for young people to learn and to lead in the community and in the country through truth and reconciliation. Indigenous and non-Indigenous, we have a shared history, both light and dark. Siyaya, family, we are one. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Fredericton.
the #1 city in North America for business costs and one of Canada's best cities for export. Atlantic Canada's most entrepreneurial city and home to Canada's most entrepreneurial university.
That's right.
Canada's first free wireless city and twice named one of the world's most intelligent communities.
8th in the world for clean air, 4th best Canadian city for families, thirst bet city in Canada to retire to.
And bilingual workforce and one of the top destinations in the country for millennials looking to carve themselves a future. With more businesses per capita than elsewhere in the country, Mr. Speaker, is it any wonder that Fredericton was recently named Startup Canada's 2016 Startup Community of the Year? I congratulate Task Force Fredericton Startup Network, municipal leadership, and community members across the region who are driving this nation-leading culture of innovation and entrepreneurship in Freddie Beach. Merci beaucoup.
The honourable member for Red Deer Mountain View.
Mr. Speaker, Christmas is a time of giving, and today I'm honoured to pay tribute to two of Red Deer Mountain View's most generous givers, Jack and Joan Donald. The Donalds are very successful entrepreneurs and are the driving force behind Parkland Fuel Corporation. Just as they've been significant contributors to our local economy, they've also given back to our community for decades.
Good people.
Jack and Joan have led fundraising campaigns for STARS, Red Deer College, the Westerner, the Hospice in Red Deer, and most recently their $3 million gift to RDC is the largest the college has ever received. This generous gift will go towards critical infrastructure in the construction of the Donald Health and Wellness Centre, a wing of the Gary W. Harris Canada Games Centre. The Donald's leadership, philanthropy, and tireless volunteerism is a legacy that will have an enormous impact for generations to come. On behalf of Central Alberta, thank you, Jack and Joe.
The honourable member for Mississauga Centre.
Mr. Speaker, last week, Liberal, Muslim and Jewish MPs got together to enjoy a Christmas dinner. We shared stories and gifts. We discussed our values and the so much we have in common. We talked about how there are those who want to label individuals based on their race, gender, sexual orientation, or beliefs. They want to sow distrust based on stereotypes. Left unchallenged, Mr. Speaker, such prejudice would erode the values that our society is built on. Our kids will stop believing us if we tell them that all you need to do is work hard and fair to accomplish anything you want, regardless of your background. We have a responsibility to set an example that we stand together, united against labels and hate. Think about this, Mr. Speaker. What other country brings Jewish and Muslim politicians to celebrate Christmas and declare solidarity against discrimination? The world is watching. We need to show the best of ourselves. And on that note, Mr. Speaker, I want to wish you, my colleagues, and all Canadians a peaceful and a rewarding holiday season.
The honourable member for Tobique-Mactaquac.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today on behalf of my riding of Tobique-Mactaquac. I'd like to begin by wishing my second oldest daughter, Madeline, a happy 11th birthday, and I apologize I couldn't be there today. Mr. Speaker, my riding of Tobique-Mactaquac is rich in beauty and humanity, and hospitality shown by the people who live there is infectious. I've had several people mention this to me on several occasions. In keeping with both the hustle of the holiday season and the true meaning behind this time of year, while continuing to live up to our reputation, I'd like to put the challenge out to all my constituents. Let's be ractivists. Random act of kindness activists. Au cours du jour de semaine.
In the coming days and weeks throughout this joyous time of year, let's promote a positive tomorrow by performing random acts of kindness.
Compliment a stranger. Hold the door for someone. Shovel the driveway for a senior. Volunteer. Buy lunches for students who need it at school. Leave a great big tip. Buy coffee for the person behind you, or clean the snow off someone's car. L'impôt que petit geste.
Any small action can change someone's entire day.
Every day, random act of kindness day, and commit to kindness and perform the act. Like my friend at Gimpaponis once said, happiness is like jam. You can't spread even just a little bit with getting it all over you.
The honourable member for Bruce Grey, Owen Sound.
Mr. Speaker, on Saturday night, Flusherton native and Ottawa Senators right-winger Chris Neil played an NHL game number 1,000. Wow. Since 1998, this Grey County son has inspired hockey fans everywhere with his work ethic, grit, and determination in each and every game. Playing 1,000 NHL hockey games is a huge feat in itself, but to do it with one team is very rare. It demonstrates an incredible amount of loyalty from both Chris Neil and the Ottawa Senators. Chris and his wife Caitlin have been active leaders in this community, including service as co-chairs of Roger Nielsen House, which enhances the lives of children and their families facing serious illnesses. Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to announce to this House that his home community of Grey Highlands has proclaimed today Chris Neil Day. Chris, the community you grew up in is especially proud to call you a native son. Congratulations on this great milestone, and thank you for being an inspiration, a role model, and for the rock'em sock'em memories.
The honourable member for Parkdale High Park.
1 year ago, on December 10th, our national project to resettle Syrian refugees reached an important milestone as the first plane touched down on Canadian soil. Monsieur le Président, nous sommes chanceux.
Mr. Speaker, we are fortunate to have seen so many Canadians open their doors, their communities, and their hearts, and to have found partners eager to take up the opportunity of building a rich, diverse, and compassionate Canada.
The global refugee sponsorship is designed to provide training and advice to countries interested in replicating Canada's private sponsorship model. This week, the initiative is bringing together sponsorship groups, refugees and governments from 9 different countries interested in replicating Canada's tremendously successful model. This is vital work, Mr. Speaker. Each of us should be proud of how much Canadians have done to make a difference.
Honourable member for Windsor-Tecumseh.
Mr. Speaker, according to the Disabled Women's Network, the rates of sexual violence, physical and verbal violence, and systemic violence are at least 3 times higher for young women and girls living with disabilities. 1 in 5 women in Canada lives with a disability, and they suffer the highest rates of poverty and unemployment. Our Prime Minister has stated repeatedly over the last year that his goal is to build a stronger, more inclusive Canada. I say to him, if you're serious, here's where you must start. Ensure that the proposed federal strategy against gender-based violence, as well as the Canadian Poverty Reduction Strategy, which should really be Poverty Elimination Strategy, are well and properly funded and completely accessible to women and girls living with disabilities. If we are serious, if Canada is to become more inclusive, then everything we do in government, every law, every policy, must be viewed through the lens of disability. And this lens must be gendered. It has to be. And Windsor-Tecumseh is proud to stand up for an inclusive Canada, and I'm proud to stand up on their behalf and wish all
member for Red Deer Lacombe.
Mr. Speaker, it's that time of year again. That's right. Festivus is upon us, and I'm filled with the sentiments of Frank Costanza, who said, "The tradition of Festivus begins with the airing of grievances. I got a lot of problems with you people, and now you're going to hear about it." For example, the Prime Minister set out his own accountability rules, which he and most of his ministers wasted no time in breaking. We have ministers selling access to themselves for $1,500 a pop to rich lobbyists and foreign governments. Not only that, the Prime Minister himself has admitted to taking money from elite billionaires who make no effort to hide their intention to buy influence with his government. Mr. Speaker, most Canadians don't have $1 million to buy the PM a statue. Most Canadians aren't going to fork over $1,500 just so they can get in a room with him and his ministers. It's time the Prime Minister and his government stop pandering to elite donors and start listening to ordinary Canadians. We're only asking for a Festivus for the rest of us.
And now, as we all look forward to every year, the honourable member for Cape Breton Canso.
Manage your expectations, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, 'twas the week before Christmas, and one thing's for certain, both opposition parties are definitely hurting. In their letter to Santa, they each had one ask, to find a new leader who was up to the task. The Orange leader looked beaten. A force that was spent when all he could muster was 47%. The dippers, they're nervous because they tried and they tried. They posted the job and no one applied. They may turn to the internet to help fill their wish and place a help wanted ad on Plenty of Fish. Now, the Tories have 14 with credentials to tout, and their values-based screening knocked none of them out. They've gone coast to coast, speaking right from the stump. It's evolved to a game of out-Donalding Trump. Of course, the word on the street, without Peter MacKay, they hope the interim leader chooses to stay. But with the wind down south, the far right have a theory. To heck with them all, let's draft Kevin O'Leary. To all candidates I offer Christmas, love, peace, and joy, but when it comes to the next election, I'd still bet on our boy.
The member doesn't always aid the speaker in creating order in the House, but still there was some appreciation. Order. Oral questions, questions orales. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The end of the session is a good time to remember that the government has turned its back on Canadian families. For example, they eliminated tax credits for sports, arts, and children's textbooks. They also increased taxes for small businesses. Mr. Speaker, when will the Prime Minister stop working for his Liberal friends and start working for Canadians? The Honourable Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, we've already started. The first thing we did at the very beginning was to reduce taxes for the middle class. That was very important for Canadians all across the country. Another important thing was the Canada Child Benefit. That is helping 9 families out of 10. They have more money in their pockets every month to spend on their families now. Mr. Speaker, this has been a very good year, and we hope that it will continue to be very good for the coming 16 years. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Nothing says middle class like a ticket to an exclusive Liberal Party conference. Just imagine the middle class problems they try to solve over champagne and caviar. And let's not forget the Chinese billionaires. Mr. Speaker, the people that the Prime Minister is hanging out with are not middle class people, and he is not there to solve middle class problems. So when's the Prime Minister going to stop spending his time with the out-of-touch elite and focus on the out-of-work Canadians?
Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, this Prime Minister and this government is working for middle-class Canadians, and those working hard to join it, those are the very people that we will continue to work for. That's why we reduced taxes on middle-class Canadians. That's why we supported families with children that need it the most. We will continue to invest in families in Canadian communities so that we can do the good work Canadians expect us to do. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, Mr. Speaker, let's compare the middle class to the Prime Minister's cash for access donors. Middle class folks are concerned with getting their mortgage approved. Billionaires at his cash for access events are lobbying to get their bank approved. Middle class families are anxious about how to pay for their grandma's health care. Billionaires at these cash for access events are trying to buy seniors' homes. Mr. Speaker, these are not middle class families with middle class problems. So when is the Prime Minister going to admit he's selling out the middle class to his billionaire friends?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, as I've said, this Prime Minister and this government is committed to working for middle-class Canadians and those working hard for joining it. We will continue to work hard for Canadian families with children through the Canada Child Benefit, tax-free, so that the families that need it the most will get the most so that they can provide the support to their families in the way that they choose. And I will repeat that the Chief Electoral Officer, in regards to ticketed fundraising events, said and confirmed that every party fundraises and every campaign does them. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Opposition Leader.
Well, let's get this straight, Mr. Speaker, with the Prime Minister's Cash for Acts fundraising. First, he claimed there was no business being discussed at these events, and he was just following the rules. But when that didn't work out, he admitted to breaking the rules. But that's okay because he's above the rules. Yesterday, his story changed again, and now we're supposed to believe that these cash for access events are all about the middle class. Mr. Speaker, when is he going to stop working as a bagman for the Liberal Party and start working for Canadians?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, we have said all along that we are always listening and engaging with Canadians from coast to coast to coast on the issues that matter to them. When it comes to making decisions, we are guided by a very important principle. What is good for the middle class? That's the approach we took when we cut taxes on middle-class Canadians. That's the approach we took when we introduced the tax-free Canada Child Benefit. And that's the approach we took when we expanded the CPP. We will continue to listen and engage with Canadians so that we can do the good work that they expect us to do. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, at stake, the Prime Minister has basically said that he is above all Canadians. He's above the law and that these rules apply to everyone else except for him. He continues to blindly defend these actions about selling access to his office, with each new excuse becoming more arrogant every day. It's embarrassing to the Canadians who expected more from him. It's embarrassing to this House, and it's actually embarrassing to his Liberal caucus who has to sit through all of this. Mr. Speaker, when will the Prime Minister finally do the right thing and end these cash for access fundraisers?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, as the member knows very well, is that when it comes to political financing, we have some of the strictest rules across this country. And this government was elected by a commitment to Canadians to work hard for middle-class Canadians and those working hard to join it. Those are the people we continue to work for. Those are the commitments that we made to Canadians, and those are the commitments that we will continue to deliver on. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The
Honourable Member for Outremont. Well, we found more evidence today that Canada 2020 is simply a wing of the Liberal Party of Canada. Access to the Prime Minister shouldn't be based on financial donations to the Liberal Party or Liberal organizations. Have you already made your maximum donation to the Liberal Party? No problem. We have other shady ways to allow you to contribute more. So my question is simple. How many Canada 2020 activities have Liberal ministers attended? How many? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, this government is listening to Canadians and engaging with them so that we can meet the real challenges that they are facing. We will continue to work for the middle class. We will continue to work for Canadians. And we will do the work that Canadians expect us to do. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
After the Prime Minister threw his minister and the President of the Liberal Party under the bus, the PMO scrambled to write new talking points, and they are truly cringeworthy. Get this, he says his cash for access events where people pay $1,500 to talk government business with the Prime Minister are meant to help the middle class. Finger on the pulse, Mr. Speaker. Do they really think that exclusive fundraisers with canapes and cocktails are a Christmas gift to the middle class?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, as I've said time and time again today, that our Prime Minister and this government is committed to working for the middle class. That's why we lower taxes on middle-class Canadians. That's why we introduced the Canada Child Benefit, tax-free for families with children that need it the most. That's why we are working closer with provinces and territories and municipalities so that we can respond to the very real challenges that Canadians are facing. Mr. Speaker, I know that all sides of this House can work together to respond to the needs of Canadians. Let's keep working harder together. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Skeena Bulkley Valley.
You know, somewhere quietly to himself, Paul Calandra smiles. just a year ago, the Liberals were championing a new way of listening to Canadians, but little did Canadians know you needed $1,500 to get their ear. But tis the season for stories, Mr. Speaker. So here's one. There was once a young prince with luscious locks and looks to charm, and he told the good people of this land that he would bring fairness to their democracy and make each and every vote count. Well, Canadians are suddenly waking up and they want to know, Will this government actually bring in a fair, proportional voting system, or is that all just a fairy tale?
The Honourable Minister of Democratic Institutions.
Mr. Speaker, as a government, we're proud to hear from Canadians before introducing legislation. It's why my parliamentary secretary and I traveled the country hearing from Canadians. It's why we brought together a committee to act as a forum to hear from Canadians. It's why, Mr. Speaker, we are reaching out in a new digital initiative in which 250,000 Canadians have already participated in, Mr. Speaker. We look forward to hearing from many more voices before introducing legislation in this House.
Order, order, order. Honourable members should remember, I know it's an exciting time of year. Members should contain themselves, really. Remember, you better not shout, you better not cry. The Honourable Member for Skeena-Bulkley Valley.
Well, Mr. Speaker, if Canadians had a nickel for every empty answer they got on electoral reform, well, they might be able to afford going to one of those Liberal fundraisers. But enough with the doublespeak. We have an historic opportunity to rise above narrow partisan interest and make every vote count. So here's one more chance for this government to live up to its promise to Canadians. Will they drop the excuses, pick up a pen, work with all of the parties to create a new and fair voting system where each and every vote counts? Yes or no?
Honourable Minister of Democratic Institutions.
Mr. Speaker, as a government, we continue to be committed to strengthening our democratic institutions. We continue to be committed to working with all members of this House to strengthen what we have. And Mr. Speaker, we're seriously committed to hearing from many more Canadians, not just through the traditional means of engagement, but through new, innovative digital initiatives. Over 250,000 Canadians have felt empowered and are responding through our digital campaign, Mr. Speaker. We look forward to hearing from many more voices before we introduce legislation.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I learned a new English word today, chaggering. According to my dictionary, it means repeating the same thing every day, forced to do so by the Prime Minister, even if you don't believe it, so that the PM can avoid answering the real questions. Mr. Speaker, when will the Liberal government finally put an end to this practice of privileged access to the Prime Minister?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I can see that my colleague likes my answer, so I'm going to repeat it. Canada has some of the strictest fundraising rules across this country, and we will continue to work on the real challenges that Canadians are facing. It is our government that is listening to Canadians and engaging with them. We will continue to do the work that they want us to do. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, Canadian youth and students are some of the most vulnerable victims of the Liberals' No Jobs plan. The Liberals are raising taxes on them, thus making life even more expensive for young Canadians. They are losing hope altogether of having a long-term job in their near future. They can't afford the $1,500 entry fee in order to get the Prime Minister's ear. How can young Canadians trust this Prime Minister when he is willing to sell out their interests to for their future to his billionaire friends?
Yay! Honourable Minister of Employment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Gives me an opportunity to talk about the many advancements that we have been doing with young Canadians from coast to coast to coast. The fact is that we're providing more supports for going to school, for getting real practical training, and for finding the skills and abilities to adapt to a very changing workforce, as we all know, with the new economic revolution called 4.0. I look forward to working with all members of the House in the new year. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lobinière. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's admission that he has been lobbied during $1,500 a head fundraising activities is deplorable, and it reflects badly on all Canadians. Today, the entire world is making fun of our democratic system. How incredibly shameful for all of us. Mr. Speaker, will the Prime Minister apologize to Canadians and respect his own ethics rules? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, as the Prime Minister said, and as all MPs on our side of the House have said, we are listening to Canadians and engaging with Canadians from coast to coast. We talk to them about subjects that they care about. When we make decisions, we are always guided by one important principle, and that is the best interest of middle-class Canadians. This is the approach that we adopted when we reduced taxes for the middle class. It's the approach that we adopted when we introduced the Canada Child Benefit, which is tax-free.
Red Deer Lacombe.
Mr. Speaker, when the Prime Minister is hosting an exclusive Cash for Access event, he claims he's advocating for the middle class. Really? I honestly hope that was an attempt at humor. This Prime Minister has no regard for his own rules, his own party rules, and he laughs in the face of the ethics laws. So when will the Prime Minister end these unethical Cash for Access events?
Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, let's look at the work that this government has done. This government has reduced taxes for middle-class Canadians. We have raised taxes on the wealthiest 1% of Canadians. This government has given more money to the families with children that need it the most by introducing the Canada Child Benefit tax-free to help those families with children that need it the most. That's the approach also that we took when we expanded the Canada Pension Plan. We will continue to respond to the very real challenges that Canadians are facing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order. The Honourable Member for Red Deer Lacombe.
Mr. Speaker, enough is enough. The Prime Minister's Cash for Access events are a national embarrassment, and he's quickly becoming a mockery around the world. The Prime Minister is selling access to his government. He knows it. The Chinese government and their detractors know it. His caucus knows it, and Canadians know it. It's called corruption. The Prime Minister has become a laughingstock on the matter of ethics. Mr. Speaker, it's time for the Prime Minister to act like a leader and put an end to these unethical Cash for Access events. So the only question is, when will he do it?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, this government is engaging with Canadians. This government is listening to Canadians. This government is responding to the very real challenges that Canadians are facing. I am not surprised that the Conservatives find it embarrassing that a government would listen to Canadians, but we know that's what Canadians want. We will continue to consult and engage with them because we need to respond to the challenges they are facing. We will continue to do the good work that Canadians expect us to do. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Sarnia-Lambton.
Well, Mr. Speaker, this is getting embarrassing for the Liberals. The Prime Minister now says that he used Cash for Access fundraisers to champion the middle class. Wow. Where I come from, the middle class don't hang out at waterfront mansions or get to jet set with Chinese billionaires. Where I come from, the middle class shows up for work every day, struggles to pay their taxes, and plays by the rules. If the Prime Minister wants some advice about the middle class, he should try meeting with the middle class. When will the Prime Minister end his corruption and put hard-working Canadians first? For Christmas, I want a real answer.
Order. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, this government has taken unprecedented levels of consultation with Canadians so that we can respond to the very real challenges that Canadians are facing. The member knows very well that when it comes to political financing, the rules are some of the most strict across this country. Even the Chief Electoral Officer has said so, and the member knows very well that the rules clearly state that only Canadians can donate to Canadian political parties. We will continue to respond to the challenges Canadians are facing. We will continue to do the good work they expect us to do. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The
Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, CSIS has backpedaled on its commitment to tell a Senate committee whether journalists have ever really been under surveillance. The government responded that no journalist is currently under surveillance, so why doesn't CSIS want to share this information that would confirm that? This leads us to believe that this practice is still underway. But there's been nothing concrete from the government to defend freedom of the press. Will the minister finally take this issue seriously and launch a public inquiry?
And the Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, on the very important issue of press freedom and protection of journalistic sources, all existing safeguards that are in place now are being reviewed to make sure that they are strong and effective. And I have said publicly many times that we are open to any and all advice coming from journalists or the legal community or others who may have submissions to make about how the law can be made more effective.
The Honourable Member for Laurier-Sainte-Marie. Mr. Speaker, the U.S. announced that they would suspend some of their arms sales to Saudi Arabia because of systemic and endemic problems, given that this country was targeting civilians in Yemen. Meanwhile, it seems that Canada is planning on having light armored vehicles that are made in Canada sent there to be used in the conflict in Yemen. Can the minister confirm this information? And is he not concerned by the fact that Canada may become complicit in war crimes? The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs. Mr. Speaker, the government does not export this particular type of arms that is in question in the case of the U.S. We condemn the repeated attacks against Yemen, including one that recently occurred in a funeral hall. These are unacceptable and tragic events, and we have repeatedly denounced these events. We want Saudi Arabia to respect its international commitments.
For Carlton.
As families look to buy Christmas gifts, they're haunted by worry. Worry of the record household debt that has now reached $1.67 for every dollar in household earnings. Worry compounded by the new taxes this government promises on wages, on gasoline, on home heating and electricity, maybe even on health and dental plans. Mr. Speaker, as we get closer to Christmas, when will this government realize that many families have nothing more to give?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, there have been some really important things that have happened this year. On January 1st, taxes were lowered for middle-class Canadians. On March 22nd, we introduced a budget that increased the guaranteed income supplement for single seniors by 10%, $943. We also introduced the Canada Child Benefit, which is helping families with, on average, $2,300. Mr. Speaker, we also changed student grants so they get 50% more for lower-income or middle-income families. It's been a year of important initiatives, and we're looking forward to doing more for middle-class Canadians in 2017.
Honourable Member for Carlton.
Well, by middle class, he apparently means the people who can afford to attend $1,500 a plate fundraisers. That's why he cut taxes for people earning $200,000 a year. They got $800, but somebody earning $45,000 got exactly zero. And the new $100 billion in debts that Liberals are adding, that is great news for the billionaire bondholders who will collect interest on it, but for the working class people who have to pay that interest through their taxes, it is a nightmare. When will this finance minister realize that Canadians have their own debts and that they cannot afford to pay for his?
Honourable Minister of Social Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful for this opportunity to repeat again that middle-class families are at the top of our priorities. We have avoided sending checks to families of millionaires, so we can send them to 9 families out of 10, which means, Mr. Speaker, the families of 6 million children with an average benefit of $600 per month, non-taxable. That's taking the families of 300,000 children out of poverty.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint-Laurent. Mr. Speaker, in their desire to take more and more money out of the pockets of Canadian taxpayers, the Liberal government has now decided to tax health insurance and dental insurance plans. Mr. Speaker, this is a very bad thing. And what will the result be? Well, this system has already existed in Quebec for a few years. And what was the result? 20% of Quebec workers no longer have a private insurance plan for health and dental. Is this what ministers want? 2.6 million Canadians losing their insurance plans? The Honourable Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, the numbers are clear. Last year was a good year in terms of policy for Canadians. We started by cutting taxes for the middle class. We also improved the lives of seniors by enhancements to the CPP. And we will be introducing we introduced our Canada Child Benefit, which is helping families. These are the things that we've done. And next year, we will continue our mission to help the middle class. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint-Laurent. Well, it's not by taxing people's private health plans that you will be meeting that objective. But in addition to taking money from taxpayers, the minister has nothing to offer to job creators and wealth creators, who next year will have to be facing the Liberal carbon tax, additional costs for pension funds, the elimination of tax credits, and the Liberals' refusal to lower corporate taxes. This is what our entrepreneurs and job creators want. Perhaps for Christmas, why is the minister acting like Scrooge?
Monsieur le Président,
The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, we want to invest in the future while helping the middle class, and that is exactly what we're doing. We've made historic investments in infrastructure in this country, and that will improve our growth rate for the future. Next year, we will continue with our plan to invest in the future for our children and grandchildren.
The Honourable Member for Salaberry-sur-Roi. Mr. Speaker, over the past 2 months, I called the government to action because students had not been paid because of the Phoenix system. Yesterday, we heard that 1,700 students employed by Parks Canada had encountered problems with payroll. Students have high expenses because of the increase in tuition fees. They stopped working 4 months ago. These were not volunteers. When will the minister responsible for public services assure me that all summer students will receive their pay?
Public services and procurement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my honourable colleague for her question. As I have said repeatedly, it is totally unacceptable for anyone to go without pay for work performed, certainly in the case of students. And I can report today that there are 3 students who are still waiting for pay, and we're working very hard on their cases to try and get them resolved as quickly as possible.
The Honourable Member for Churchill, Kiwatnook-Aski.
Mr. Speaker, it's been 2 months since the Phoenix deadline, and 10,000 cases have yet to be fixed, meaning thousands of Canadians are still waiting to get paid. And yet we've learned that executives in charge of this fiasco are getting bonuses. So let's get this straight. Executives are getting performance bonuses for a program that doesn't work. With the holidays around the corner, Mr. Speaker, this adds insult to injury to the so many who are still waiting to get paid. So will this minister prove that her government takes this seriously and halt the bonuses until Phoenix is fixed?
Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement.
Mr. Speaker, again, I thank my colleague for the question. There's no one more concerned about this issue than I am as the minister responsible. We are working very hard. We have put measures in place, including satellite offices. We have hired 250 additional people to deal with these issues. We are now dealing with really complex issues. In fact, Mr. Speaker, the 10,000 cases that remain are issues that have been outstanding, some going back 3 years. So we are doing everything we can to deal with the issue, and we will continue to do that. In the interim, if there are any employees who are infected by this pay system, I encourage them to get in touch with us and to make sure that they...
The Honourable Member for Bay of Quinte. Order.
Mr. Speaker, after 3 governments, 4 prime ministers, and 14 years since the project began, I was proud that our government has successfully acquired fixed-wing search and rescue aircraft. These aircraft play a critical role carrying out search and rescue operations to respond to Canadians in distress across our vast country of over 18 million square kilometres. Can the Minister of Public Services and Procurement please inform this House what this announcement will mean for all Canadians? Thank you, Mr.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my honourable colleague from Bay of Quinte for his question and for his hard work. Last week in Trenton, we announced the award of a contract to acquire a new fleet of 16 modern search and rescue aircraft. This announcement fulfills our commitment to ensure that men and women in uniform have the equipment they need to carry out the work expected of them. This contract will create middle-class jobs for Canadians throughout the country and generate growth for Canada's aerospace and defence sector. But more importantly, Mr. Speaker, these aircraft will help our military save the lives of Canadians every day.
Honourable Member for Selkirk, Interlake, Eastman.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberals have refused to provide any details about the deployment of 600 Canadian troops to a dangerous African mission. Canadians are demanding the facts. Yesterday, the Defence Minister broke his promise to provide Canadians with the information by the end of this year. He's now saying he's going to hide that information until next year. This isn't like keeping your children's Christmas present a surprise. Our soldiers' lives are on the line. Will the Liberals start being transparent finally about their blatant political decision and allow for a full debate and a vote before they deploy our troops to Mali?
Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
My colleague is completely right to say that this is a very serious decision that must be taken very seriously in a comprehensive way. But where is in contradiction with himself, he's asking me to do that in the last 10 seconds that you allow me, Mr. Speaker, in this House. No, it will be done properly in due time with full transparency and will show how much Canada will honour its commitment for peace.
That's it.
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, the Minister is not answering the question. I will put it differently. The Senate Standing Committee on National Security and Defence has asked the government that before any deployment of troops, such as the one the Liberals are planning in Africa, that it share with us, the House of Commons, the size of the mission, the objectives, the risks incurred, the costs, the rules of engagement, and establish support from all parties. The Senate is based on the Dutch experience, which is an example of transparency and consensus. Will the Minister of Defence follow that example and share all the facts with us so we can have an enlightened debate? The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs. Same question, same answer, Mr. Speaker. It's very important that the Government of Canada communicate to Canadians in all transparency this fundamental decision, that is sending Canadian troops to defend peace, as we've always done. We're one of the rare countries in the world that has never sent troops abroad except to protect democracy, peace, and justice, and that is what we will do, and we will communicate this fully to Canadians because they are entitled to that.
Barry Innisfil.
Mr. Speaker, Australia, the United States, and the UK have banned the use of mefloquine, the anti-malarial drug, by members of their armed forces. Last week, we learned Germany will no longer be administering the drug to their armed forces. This decision puts the Canadian Armed Forces one step behind our NATO and European allies. The drug has a toxic side effect and leads to aggression and suicide. Mr. Speaker, the Defense Minister continues to defend the use of mefloquine. Why can't he see that our allies have acted to protect their forces from mefloquine and do the same to protect Canadian troops?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for National Defence.
Mr. Speaker, we take the health of our troops very seriously. Malaria is a life-threatening disease present in many areas of the world. Individuals are carefully assessed and screened by their health services. As the Chief of Defence Staff has stated lately, the Surgeon General is looking into the use of mefloquine and will report back imminently.
The Honourable Member for Yorkton Melville.
Mr. Speaker, all of our allies are facing that same malaria. In August of this year, Lord Dinant, head of the British Army, apologized to troops who had taken mefloquine while he was Chief of the General Staff. Although he didn't take the drugs himself, he saw firsthand its catastrophic side effects. On September 15th, the Australian Department of Veterans Affairs established a dedicated mefloquine support team for their service members and veterans. Why is this Liberal government willing to risk our soldiers' health and lives by refusing to recognize the dangers of mefloquine, like our allies have, before they deploy them to Africa?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for National Defence.
Mr. Speaker, mefloquine is a Health Canada approved drug and continues to be an option for malaria prophylaxis as recommended by the Public Health Agency of Canada and by most public health and travel medicines around the world. Having said that, however, Mr. Speaker, the Chief of Defence Staff has caused the Surgeon General to look into the use of mefloquine prior to any future deployments.
The Honourable Member for Abitibi, James Nunavik-Ayu. For more than a year, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has repeated the importance of our relations with the Aboriginal peoples. For over a year, I've been rising in this House to ask why this government is sending a contradictory message to the First Nations. This morning, we found out that survivors of the St. Anne's Residential School, which had an electric chair and where Aboriginal children were forced to eat their own vomit, have to battle it out in the courts to get compensation and not have to pay the government's legal fees. That's disgusting, Mr. Speaker. So when will they come to action in this government? The Honourable Minister of Aboriginal Affairs. Mr. Speaker, our government is determined to do justice to all the victims of this somber chapter in our history and ensure that eligible individuals receive the compensation they're due. We do not usually request legal fees from the victims. As a general rule, these cost issues are settled at the end of the issue, not while it's being processed.
Mr. Speaker, CETA will dramatically increase foreign takeovers of Canadian companies by raising the threshold for reviews from $600 million to $1.5 billion. This will apply to EU companies as well as American, Chinese, Russian, and many other foreign companies. The EU is years away from fully ratifying CETA, so why is this government moving full steam ahead? Instead of permitting more foreign takeovers, the Liberals should be standing up for Canadians by tightening the rules. Will the Liberals support the NDP's amendments to remove these dangerous provisions from CETA?
Yeah. The Honourable Minister of International Trade.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to start by thanking the Conservatives and particularly the Bloc who joined us yesterday in supporting this progressive agreement that is going to add to Canadian GDP and create jobs. It's going to lead to an increase of 0.77% to our GDP. That translates to roughly $11.44 billion. Curtis McBride, CEO of Myovision Technologies in Kitchener, said CETA will help his company, and I quote, reap far greater gains from existing deals with European companies. Baljit Sierra of Markham says, quote, CETA will generate...
The Honourable Member for Kamloops, Thompson Caribou.
Mr. Speaker, today the CBC posted an article by Charmaine Stick of Onion Lake Cree Nation, which was titled, I Starved Myself for Financial Transparency. She stated, for 13 days in June 2014, I went on a hunger strike. The First Nations Financial Transparency Act, which the Liberal government stopped enforcing last December, was good for people. It was somewhere for grassroots people to go to get answers. We need equality. Without the Act, there's no equality for the membership in our community. When will the Minister start empowering these courageous women and enforce the Act?
Honourable Minister of Indigenous and Northern Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, everyone, including First Nations governments, wants increased transparency and accountability, but we will achieve this through working in full partnership with First Nations leadership and organizations. Before and after the election, First Nations from coast to coast to coast were clear. Top-down, made-in-Ottawa solutions will not work, and our government's committed to reviewing the laws, including the FNFTA, and will review in full consultation with the First Nations.
Order. The Honourable Member for Kamloops, Thompson Caribou.
Mr. Speaker, it has been over a year. I don't think it takes that long to consult and come up with a plan. We learn now that the Liberals have set up a secretive four-person club that's concocting ways to transfer billions of dollars directly to the chiefs of First Nations. The Minister has stripped financial transparency protection for grassroots band members. Band members need more information, not less, so they can be empowered to hold their leadership accountable. When will the Minister stop her attack on financial transparency and grassroots First Nations?
The Minister of Indigenous Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, I was very proud to meet with the Assembly of First Nations and the new Committee on Financial and Fiscal Relationships. The accountability and transparency is one of the things that they are studying very closely. They are consulting with their nations, coast to coast to coast, and they will report in 1 year about how we will move out from under this grants and contribution system to treating nations nation to nation.
The Honourable Member for Thornhill.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberals embarrassed themselves yesterday when they donned Ukrainian traditional dress to praise an ally and then voted against recognition of the Soviet genocide of Crimean Tatars. Whipping MPs to cozy up to Putin. Just another example, Mr. Speaker, of Liberals muting Canada's principled voice on human rights this year, as with China, Iran, Cuba, Ethiopia, Syria, Congo, and the UN. Mr. Speaker, when will the Liberals stand up and speak truth out loud to tyrants and despots?
Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, at the end of this year, Amnesty International came with a report card about what we have done for human rights during the year. It is what they have to say. Canada has offered an encouraging example to the world of the importance and value of embracing human rights. There have been major advances in giving greater priority to human rights in Canadian foreign policy, including championing a strong gender equality agenda, making human rights part of annual performance review for Canada. Mr. Speaker, they also said...
Honourable Member for Park.
Mr. Speaker, during the campaign, we promised to engage Canadians about how to ensure that our national security framework keeps us safe and protects our rights and freedoms. Like many honourable members, I participated in these consultations along with my constituents. Could the Minister of Public Safety please tell the House how Canadians have responded to this opportunity to make their voices heard on this matter of critical importance?
The Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, this unprecedented engagement with Canadians about our national security framework has been a resounding success. Online, we have received more than 53,000 individual responses, plus another 17,000 emails and form letters, and that's on top of meetings and ridings across the country, including one I attended recently with the member for Scarborough Rouge Park. After submissions close online tomorrow, we will examine all of that input as we act to ensure that Canadians are safe and their rights and freedoms are properly protected.
Bravo.
The Honourable Member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. Mr. Speaker, the Institut Nordique du Québec is a tool for the development of the north of Quebec, Ontario, and the Canadian Arctic. Quebec government, Laval University, and private enterprise have confirmed their financial support for the Institute. Why is it that once again this Liberal government forgets about the regions? The region of Quebec City is ignored. Will the Prime Minister, who asked his Minister of Families not to look after files from the Quebec City region, can respect people from the greater Quebec City region and support the Institut Nordique?
For Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, we are proud of our relationship with the province of Quebec. We have recently received the application for this project and projects under review. And the minister responsible for the province of Quebec knows about this, and we're working with them. This project is very important to us. As we review this, we will let the province know of the outcome. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Sherbrooke.
Mr. Speaker, despite the fancy words by the government that says it wants to attack tax evasion, we find out that the company that rents out office space to the CRA engages in tax evasion. It makes no sense to say is progressive and wants to fight tax evasion while at the same time signing public contracts with such enterprises. Will the Minister of National Revenue think that this is acceptable, and will she stop closing her eyes and put an end to this scandalous contract? Mr. Speaker, the situation raised by my colleague is greatly concerning. I've discussed this with my colleague, the Minister for Public Services and Procurement. The real estate needs of the agency as a tenant are insured by Public Services and Procurement. We don't deal directly with the landlords, but please be assured that our government will continue to act so that all Canadians pay their fair share of taxes. That's at the heart of my mandate, and I will not let go of this. The Honourable Member for Moncton, Riverview-Dieppe. Last week, Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Minister for Sport and People with Disabilities announced a process for consultation on Canada's membership in the optional protocol related to the UN Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities. As we know, Canada is one of the first countries to have signed this convention. Will the Minister responsible for sport and the disabled inform us about the talks regarding the membership in the optional protocol? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my honourable colleague for her question. We are very proud of this. The Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities ensures the protection and promotion of the rights and dignity of persons with disabilities so that they are treated without discrimination.
Government and stakeholders, as they all play an important role in the process of Canada's accession to the optional protocol. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to congratulate my colleague from Global Affairs. The standing ovation he received from the disability community at the time of this announcement was well-deserved. Thank you.
The honourable member for Dauphin, Swan River, Neepawa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We'll give the Minister of Public Services another chance. And yesterday we discovered that over 1,600 students working at Parks Canada were the most recent victims of the Liberals' Phoenix pay fiasco. Reports indicate that there are still thousands of employees without pay heading into the Christmas season. The Liberals' continued contempt for public service, especially Parks Canada student employees, is unacceptable. Will the Liberal government finally take action to ensure that our public servants are paid in time for Christmas?
The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement.
Mr. Speaker, I thank my colleague for his question. We are working very hard to resolve the issues associated with Phoenix, many of which date back prior to Phoenix. With respect to the students, there are 3 students who are left waiting for pay, and we're working very hard to resolve their issues. But it is totally unacceptable for employees to go without pay for work performed, especially at a time like this, and that's why we're encouraging all employees who are finding themselves in a difficult position as a result of this to contact us and to make arrangements for emergency pay.
The honourable member for Saanich, Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my great hope that we could leave this place with glad tidings. I hear news that the Government of Canada, after decades of inaction, is finally prepared to ban the use, import and export of asbestos. I hope this is true, and I ask the Prime Minister if this can be confirmed and whether Canada will also take action to list asbestos under the Rotterdam Convention so that developing countries can have prior informed consent.
The Honourable Minister of Science.
Mr. Speaker, our government is committed to moving forward on a ban on asbestos. I am working with my colleagues on a government-wide approach, and what I can tell this House is that I will be announcing additional timelines by the end of the year. Our government has already taken action by placing a ban on the use of asbestos in new government construction and has put in place a national asbestos inventory.
I would like to inform the members of the presence in the gallery of the Honourable Michel Sanson, the Minister of Energy, the Minister of Acadian Affairs and the Francophonie, the Minister of Trade, and the Minister responsible of Part 1 of the Gaming Control Act for the province of Nova Scotia.
And now I believe the Honourable Opposition House Leader has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do have a question for the Government House Leader about the future business of the House, and I would ask if she would consider an idea in my question. I know we're all going to be getting ready to go on our Christmas holidays fairly soon, but I think even during the Christmas time, there are a lot of people in this country who are suffering because of job losses. I wondered if she would consider, when we return after the Christmas break, if we might be able to have a take-note debate regarding the job losses that have been suffered in the energy sector. Thank you very much, Mr.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank my colleague, the Opposition House Leader, for her question. I would like to indicate, Mr. Speaker, that the government has no objection to holding a take-note debate on this topic upon our return in 2017.
I'd like to move that notwithstanding any standing orders or usual practice of the House, A, when orders of the day are called on Wednesday, December 14th, 2016, a Minister of the Crown be authorized to move without notice a motion relating to the Senate's amendment to Bill C-29, a second act to implement certain provisions of the budget tabled in Parliament on March 22nd, 2016, and other measures, and that during the consideration of the motion related to the said bill, a member from each recognized party, as well as a member from the Bloc Québécois, may speak for not more than 10 minutes, followed by 5 minutes for question and comments, after which the motion shall be deemed adopted. B, Bill S4, an act to implement a convention and an arrangement for the avoidance of double taxation and the prevention of fiscal evasion with respect to taxes on income and to amend an act in respect of a similar agreement be deemed concurred in at report stage and be ordered for the consideration at third reading stage later this day, and that when the House begins debate on the third reading motion of the bill, a member from each recognized party, as well as a member from the Bloc Québécois, may speak for not more than 5 minutes with no question and comment period, after which the bill shall be deemed read a third time and passed. And C, when proceedings on Bills C-29 and S-4 have concluded, the House shall adjourn until Monday, January 30th, 2017, provided that, for the purposes of Standing Order 28, it shall be deemed to have sat on Thursday, December 15, and Friday, December 16, 2016. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Excellent. Does the Honourable Minister have unanimous consent of the House to move the motion? Agreed. The House has heard the terms of the motion. Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Carried. Government House Leader. Order. Order.
Mr. Speaker, I first want to wish you, Mr. Speaker, and your family a very happy holiday season. We have been able to achieve quite a bit over a limited amount of time during this fall sitting of Parliament. I want to thank my counterpart House Leader, the members for Portage Lisgar and Victoria and their respective teams for their collaboration and cooperation. I very much look forward to that continued collaboration in the new year as we continue to work in the best interest of Canadians. I would also like to thank the whips and other members of the House leadership from all sides and their teams for their hard work, as well as all members of this House for their continued work. I hope everyone enjoys the time with their families, loved ones, and with their constituents, and that all come back to this House in January refreshed and ready to roll up their sleeves once again. I would be remiss, Mr. Speaker, if I did not thank and recognize the tremendous staff that help us get work done in this place. My thanks to all the branches and services of the House administration. Without their contributions, we would not be able to do the good work that we do. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank our pages. They have now a few months under their belts. I wish them the best in their exam period and hope they enjoy their time away from this place and that they too come back refreshed. We certainly look forward to seeing them in 2017. Again, Mr. Speaker, to you and all my colleagues, a very happy and enjoyable holiday season and a very happy New Year. Thank you.
Honourable Opposition House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I want to echo and return the good wishes that the Honourable House Leader just conveyed. I do want to begin by wishing the House Leader a very Merry Christmas and Happy Holiday, as well as our counterpart, the House Leader for the NDP. It's been a joy and a privilege to be able to work together. I know it's a new position for all three of us, and I think with our teams, we have been able to work fairly well, and so I wish her team, the whip and their team, very happy holidays. I also want to mention, Mr. Speaker, the staff here who have helped us so much, the clerks here at the table. Thank you so much. The votes that they get through every week. We just wish you a wonderful holiday and a restful time. We want to thank the pages, they were mentioned, but we appreciate so much the pages who look after us here in the chamber. Who keep us safe. They do so in such a gracious manner. They always treat us so respectfully, but Mr. Speaker, we know how they're looking out for our best interest, and we so much appreciate what the security is doing. We thank the interpreters as well, who do a wonderful job of ensuring that we always understand each other, and when we don't always give them a lot of good words to deal with, they still translate those very well. So we appreciate that. All of the House staff that are here, the bus drivers who get us here every day, make sure that we're to our boats on time. I wish you, Mr. Speaker, your staff, a very Merry Christmas. Those who are sitting, who are deputy speakers as well and also take the chair, we wish you happy holidays and a Merry Christmas. To all of my colleagues in the House, thank you for all the work that you do. Have a good time with your family, with your friends. Relax. be reinvigorated, and we'll all be back here in 2017. Merry Christmas.
Honourable Member for Victoria.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I too would like to take a brief moment to rise on behalf of the NDP caucus to extend season's greetings and holiday wishes to you and to colleagues and staff across the parliamentary precinct. I'd like to thank the Government House Leader and the House Leader for the official opposition who spoke before me for the productive work and discussions that we've had over the past number of months as we've settled into our new roles. While it has not always been easy, I feel like our work on behalf of Canadians has been valuable. Happy holidays to them and to their entire caucuses and teams.
A number of people work behind the scenes to support all parliamentarians in our daily work. I would like to thank them as well and to wish them a very happy holiday season, whether it be the interpreters, the broadcasting service, who allows all Canadians to see our work, the security officers who protect us, or the maintenance staff and the people who maintain order in the House and on the Hill.
And to your team of procedural experts at the table, journals, committees, and across the precinct for your dedication, and to wish you good health and happiness in the new year.
I would be remiss if I did not wish a happy holidays to the Pages, who are undoubtedly eager to go home to see their families after this first session in Ottawa. They offer us a very professional service despite the workload of their studies and the final exams that are currently underway.
To take one final moment, Mr. Speaker, to draw to the attention of all members of this House that Ms. Lynn Legault is preparing for a well-deserved retirement after serving as a supervisor in the House of Commons Page program for the past 32 years. Mr. Speaker, Lynn has served this House over the span of 8 different prime ministers and has seen the history of our nation unfold on the floors of this chamber. Lynn's perpetual smile and kind heart have had an impact on the more than 1,200 pages that she has supervised. 40 pages per year after 32 years, that really adds up. Those former pages include at least 3 members of the current clerks at the table, as well as the Honourable Member for Hull-Aylmer and the Minister of Families, Children and Social Development. And I have to say that one of my own staff in the House Leader's office, Alex Telka, remembers Lynn as one of the first people he met when he moved to Ottawa to take up his role as a page. And he tells me that Lynn's kindness and warmth are known in every corner of the Hill, given the number of former pages she has influenced who are now working across the precinct. Merci à Lynn Legault.
Thank you to Lynn Legault for 4 years of loyal services and commitment. I wish you a very happy retirement, Lynn. On behalf of all NDP members, happy holidays to everyone and a very happy New Year 2017. Before going further, I'd like to thank the member for Victoria for having mentioned Ms. Lynn Legault. Apparently, she is not in the House today, but perhaps she ensured that she wasn't here because she's so modest. But yes, she will indeed be missed. The honourable member for Montcalm.
I would like permission to take the floor to offer my best wishes for the holidays. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased on behalf of my party, the Bloc Québécois, and on behalf of my parliamentary group, to give you my best wishes for the holiday season and also for next year, 2017. I recognize your quest to achieve fairness in this House, and I also want to give my best wishes to your entire team, who serve us with great devotion. Also, I'd like to thank the interpreters who do excellent work in this House because I use their services. And I'd like to thank all of my colleagues from all of our parties and to give them our best wishes for the holiday season and the new year. You know, Mr. Speaker, we are all the standard bearers for our political ideals, but behind those standard bearers, there are real human beings who will be going home to their families today and spending good time with them. So we'll see you next year, and I hope that it will be as vigorous a year as the one that just ended. Thank you.
The honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Not very many words to add. I think we have to thank all of the team here on Parliament Hill. I think the only group that's been forgotten are the wonderful people who serve us in the cafeterias and the dining rooms who get laid off right now and get rehired when we get back. So special thoughts for them, for all our security guards, for the translators, for the table officers, for your team, Mr. Speaker, and to each and every member of this House. Mais au revoir pour les fêtes. Joyeux
Best wishes for the holidays. Merry Christmas.
Arrival of the birth of our Lord and Savior. For others, we just celebrate a great time among family and friends. And for my dear friends in the Jewish community, it's a bit delayed now, but happy Hanukkah. And to everyone in the Conservative caucus who earlier raised Festivus, I don't want anyone left out. Festivus for the rest of us. Merry Christmas.
I thank all those who have spoken, the House leaders and others, for their kind words and their generous comments toward all colleagues, and for thanking so many folks who work for us. And I want to add my thanks to all members, to the the clerks, the pages, all the staff of the House of Commons, of the Parliamentary Protective Service, of the Library of Parliament, who all provide such great help to us, the staff of members of Parliament and ministers who work either here in Ottawa or across the country. We couldn't do our jobs without them, and we're very grateful for the wonderful work that they do. And allow me please to offer my best wishes to everyone for a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Holidays, and have a wonderful and safe season. Remember, many members of Parliament and other Canadians will be driving during this period. Members, especially from large rural ridings, do a lot of driving, and I always am concerned that they be careful when they do so, because sometimes they're tired. So it's good to take a rest if need be. Keep that in mind, please. Orders of, no, pardon me, routine proceedings now. Tabling of documents, the Honourable Minister of International Trade.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and happy holidays to you and your team. I have the honor to table in both official languages the 2016 Annual Report to Parliament on the activities of the Office of the Extractive Sector Corporate Social Responsibility Councillor. This covers the May 2015 to May 2016 period. This report was prepared by the Extractive Sector Corporate Social Responsibility Councillor. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and happy holidays.
All right. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pursuant to Standing Order 36(8), I have the honour to table in both official languages the government's responses to 64 petitions.
Yeah. Introduction of government bills, statements by ministers, reports from interparliamentary delegations. The Honourable Member for Aurora, Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill.
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order 34.1, I have the honour to present to the House in both official languages the report of the Canadian Parliamentary Delegation respecting its participation at the Election Observation Mission of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, held in Washington, D.C. and Raleigh, North Carolina from November 5th to 8th, 2016. Thank you.
Presenting reports from committees, the Honourable Member, l'Honorable de Brome-Missisquoi.
The Honourable Member for Brome-Missisquoi. Mr. Speaker, before proceeding to table the report from the Committee on Official Languages, allow me to thank the staff of the House who have contributed to this report, including the clerk, and Lucie Lecomte and Geneviève Gosselin, who did the research. A lot of work went into this report, and I'm proud to be on a committee where all of the members form a big family. Thank you to all the members of the Standing Committee on Official Languages, including one who's the new father of a bilingual child, the member for Drummond for his targeted approach, the member for Madawaska-Restigouche for his collegiality, the member for Beauport-Côte-de-Beaupré, Île-d'Orléans, Charlevoix for his hard work, the member for Rimouski, the member for Sudbury for their dynamic approach, the member for Sackville-Preston for their joie de vivre, and the member for Saint-Boniface-Saint-Vital for their community engagement. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to table in both official languages the third report of the Standing Committee on Official Languages, entitled Toward a New Action Plan for Official Languages and Building New Momentum for Immigration in Francophone Minority Communities. This is pursuant to Standing Order 109. The committee asks to table to receive a response to the current report. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I too want to congratulate all of the members of the House and yourself for a very successful year and wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a very happy New Year. So, Mr. Speaker, I have a great honour to present in both official languages the 9th report of the Standing Committee on Transport, Infrastructure and Communities in relation to its study of certain provisions of the Fair Rail for Grain Farmers Act. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and have a great Christmas holiday.
Honourable Member for King Vaughan.
Hi, I'd like to also take this opportunity to thank all the staff that help this House to run so smoothly, and I want to thank the great staff that we have in the committee for their excellent work this year. We've been working very hard, and they've done an excellent job, and I just want to call them out in the House today. Mr. Speaker, I have the honour to present in both official languages the 4th report of the Standing Committee on the Environment and Sustainable Development in relation to Bill C-18, an act to amend the Rouge National Urban Park Act, the Parks Canada Agency Act, and the Canada National Parks Act. The committee has studied the bill and has decided to report the bill back to the House without amendments. Thank you. And happy Hanukkah and happy holidays to all. Thank you.
Introduction of private members' bills. Mrs. MacLeod, Kamloops Thompson Caribou, seconded by Ms. Watts, moves for leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act Landlord Consent. This motion is deemed adopted. The Honourable Member for Kamloops Thompson Caribou.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And of course, this is looking for landlord consent. As you may be aware, medical marijuana can be grown in homes, and times landlords are absolutely devastated by the impact with no control. So what I'm seeking is that if medical marijuana is to be grown in a home, that the landlord needs to give permission first. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mrs. MacLeod, Kamloops Thompson Caribou, seconded by Ms. Watts, moves that the bill be now read a first time and be printed. This motion is deemed adopted.
First reading of this bill, première lecture de ce projet de loi.
When shall the bill be read a second time? At the next sitting of the House. Mr. Julian, seconded by Mr. Davies, moves for leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Federal Courts Act, International Promotion and Protection of Human Rights. This motion is deemed adopted. The Honourable Member for New Westminster Burnaby.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for my seconder, the excellent member for Vancouver Kingsway. There are mining companies that are acting irresponsibly, or who act responsibly rather, but there are others who ignore environmental and labor rights. And we can no longer ignore these violations of human rights abroad. It's a question of fundamental human rights.
Civil cause of action that would allow the federal court to hear claims for violations of international law that occur outside of Canada where there's no established impartial legal system. And the Canadian Association of Labour Lawyers has endorsed this bill. Our bill helps to end impunity by holding corporations accountable for violations of human rights wherever they occur. I hope all members will support this initiative to protect and promote human rights around the world.
Monsieur Julien, Appuyé.
Mr. Julian, second by Mr. Davies, moves that this bill be now read a first time and printed. This motion is deemed to be adopted.
This bill, première lecture de ce projet de loi.
Quand ce projet de loi
When will this bill be read a second time? At the next sitting of the House.
Mr. Willett, seconded by Mr. Jevsnowski, moves for leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Provide for Reporting on Compliance with the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. This motion is deemed adopted. The honourable member for Winnipeg Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very proud with the support of the member of Etobicoke Centre here to present a bill which offers a higher level of accountability, an act to provide for reporting on compliance with the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. The federal government, in consultations with provincial and territorial governments, and with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, must report 15 sitting days after June 2nd of every year. This bill fulfills the 7 teachings of honesty, knowledge, humility, respect, love, effort, and courage. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tapwe ake kitwam. Hai, hai.
Mr. Willett, seconded by Mr. Jevsnowski, moves that the bill be now read a first time and be printed. This motion is deemed adopted.
First reading of this bill, première lecture de ce projet de loi.
When shall the bill be read a second time? At the next sitting of the House. Ms. Kwan, seconded by Mr. Davies, moves for leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Citizenship Act and the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act, granting and revoking of citizenship. This motion is deemed adopted. The honourable member for Vancouver East.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. This bill seeks to address 3 issues. One, with the Citizenship Act, it seeks to restore the procedural fairness for those who are facing with citizenship revocation, amendments that I tabled at committee that unfortunately did not pass, and I'm hoping that it will get through a private member's bill. The other 2 aspects deal with the Refugee Protection Act, and one is on cessation, particularly for refugees who's had their status cessated as a result of traveling back to their country of origin. And this is something that is egregious and should be fixed. Last but not least, for Canadians, due to a series of arcane laws over the years, a number of Canadians find themselves without Canadian citizenship after all these many years. That should not be the case. Prior to the 150th anniversary of this country, we need to restore citizenship for those who lost citizenships because of these archaic laws. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Ms. Kwan, seconded by Mr. Davies, moves that the bill be now read a first time and be printed. This motion is deemed adopted.
First reading of this bill, première lecture de ce projet de loi.
When shall the bill be read a second time? At the next sitting of the House. Première lecture de projet de loi d'intérêt public.
First reading of Senate public bills. Motions. Presenting petitions.
For Renfrew, Nipissing, Pembroke.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to present a petition signed by campers who stayed at the Castleton Hills RV Park in Castleton, Ontario, which is located in the tranquil rolling hills of Northumberland, Peterborough South. The petitioners call on the government to ensure that campgrounds with fewer than 5 full-time, year-round employees will continue to be recognized and taxed as small businesses.
Goma Manitoulin, Kapuskasing.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to deliver a petition signed by individuals from Wikwemikong First Nation who see how media concentration and digital convergence have made community TV and media even more important and necessary. They point out that the Broadcasting Act stipulates that community private and public broadcasting should complement one another, and that CRTC policy states, and I quote, "The community channel should be primarily of a public service nature, facilitating self-expression through free and open access by members of that community." These petitioners are asking the government to enable a network of community-operated media centres. They feel this will ensure the survival of community TV, the availability of local media in areas not served by private or public media, and will give all Canadians access to multi-platform media skills training and content distribution in the digital economy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Merry
The honourable member for Toronto Danforth.
3 petitions on behalf of residents of the ridings of Toronto Centre, Toronto St. Paul's, and Thunder Bay Superior North, calling on the government to enable a network of community-operated media centres to ensure the survival of community TV, the availability of local media in towns and neighbourhoods not served by public or private media, and that all Canadian residents have access to multi-platform media skills training and content distribution in the digital economy. I would like to thank Dawn Jobson, Kathy Edwards, Donna Mikulik, and the Regent Park Focus Youth Media Arts Centre for the advocacy on this issue. Thank you.
Glanbrook.
Present first electronic petition, 757 signatures of people that are demanding that if the government is going to change the federal electoral system, that they first seek a mandate from the people through a referendum. And Mr. Chair, if you'd give me the liberty for just one moment, a group of people that I think all of my colleagues would like to wish a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to would be our Canadian forces, all the first responders, those people who keep us safe, and particularly, Mr. Chair, those Canadian forces who are in theatre right now, who are risking their life in the Middle East. We want to remind them that we'll remember them throughout our holidays. We'll be praying for them and their families, that they continue to be safe and continue to guard all those things that are valuable to us: democracy, human rights, and the rule of law.
Thank the honourable member for Glanbrook for mentioning our Canadian Forces personnel and all first responders, and I know that all members would join him in that. The honourable member for Cypress Hills Grasslands.
Here, I've got two petitions here on two different subjects. A number of my constituents call upon the House of Commons to pass legislation which would recognize preborn children as separate victims when they're injured or killed during the commission of an offence against their mothers, which would allow 2 charges to be laid against the offender instead of just 1. I have a second petition here that calls on the Government of Canada to maintain the listing of the Islamic Republic of Iran as a state supporter of terrorism for as long as the Iranian regime continues to sponsor terrorism. And on that note, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to wish you, the members here, and all Canadians a very Merry Christmas.
Member for Vancouver Kingsway.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise and present a petition signed by dozens of residents of Vancouver Kingsway in the Vancouver area, calling on this government to enable a network of community-operated media centres to ensure the survival of community TV, to ensure the availability of local media in towns and neighbourhoods not served by public or private media, and any Canadian residents to make sure that all Canadian residents have access to multi-platform media skills training and content distribution in the digital economy. These are people that recognize the vital importance of community media in this country as a complement to private and public elements. And I as well would like to add my best wishes to you and all members of this House for a peaceful and joyous holiday season, and best wishes for a Happy New Year.
The Honourable Member for Abitibi-Témiscamingue. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I am pleased to present a petition that was signed mainly by people from the area of Témiscamingue in my area. They believe in the importance of community television and access to local media. They are calling upon the government and the CRTC to take action on this issue.
Member for Vaudreuil-Soulanges.
Member for Vaudreuil-Soulanges. Mr. Speaker, I have a petition here about community television and media signed by dozens of people in my riding of Vaudreuil-Soulanges, asking the government to establish a community media centre to ensure service by community television, the availability of community media in sectors not served by other forms of media, and that all residents of Canada have access to multimedia platform training and the digital economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise to table a petition signed by over 4,000 people in East Vancouver and in around the Lower Mainland. This, joined with the online petition, brings the petition to over 10,000 people. And they wish to bring to the House the attention that Crab Park, which is a park that the community fought long and hard for and occupied Crown land to establish park back in 1984. It notes that the Port of Vancouver is going to expand Centerm Terminal by infilling the area by the size of Crab Park, and the community is very concerned with respect to the environmental impacts and the enjoyment of the park as a result of this expansion. It also notes that in 2015, the people of Vancouver East were caught in the smoke of chemical fire from the Centrum terminal that required evacuation. And of course, in our community have many seniors and people who are disabled who would be challenged as a result of this situation. And they are very concerned with this expansion with respect to that. Mr. Speaker, it also notes that the regulation brought forward by the former government grants the port sweeping powers, thereby giving them the authority to basically grant their own decisions and to review their own projects. So it is calling on the government to conduct a full review of the port and to bring accountability back to the port, and to call on the Minister of Transport to exercise his authority to stop the westward expansion of the Centrum terminal.
The Honourable Member for New Westminster Burlingame.
I'm pleased to present a petition on behalf of nearly 150 residents of the City of New Westminster, the City of Burnaby, and some other cities in the Lower Mainland. These are petition signatures that were collected through the wonderful work of the activists of New West TV. These are volunteer activists who support community television. And the petition points to the following, that this federal government should be supporting community television, should be acting and ensuring that there's a network of community-operated media centres to ensure the survival of community television, but also to build on that, the availability of community television and community local media in towns and neighbourhoods not served by community television or community media currently, and to ensure that all Canadian residents have access to multi-platform media skills training and content distribution in the digital economy. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Presenting petition, présentation de pétition. Questions on the order paper. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, and if I may, just to join all others in just wishing you and your family and all, in fact, a very Merry Christmas, prosperous New Year, and best of the holiday seasons. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, the following question will be answered today, question 591. And furthermore, Mr. Speaker, I would ask if a revised response to question number Q, question 550, originally tabled on December 2, 2016, and a government's response to question 590 could be made orders for return. These returns would be tabled immediately.
The pleasure of the House that the aforementioned questions be made orders for return, that they be tabled immediately. Agreed and so ordered. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
And then finally, Mr. Speaker, I'd ask that all the remaining questions be allowed to stand at this time.
Is it agreed? Agreed and so ordered. Oh, yes. Notices of motion for the productions of papers. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would ask that all notices of motions for the production of papers be allowed to stand at this time, please.
Is it agreed? Agreed and so ordered. Orders of the day.
Orders of the day, government orders, consideration of Senate amendments to Bill C-29, Budget Implementation Act 2016.
Mr. Sohi for Mr. Morneau. No, excuse me. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move, seconded by the Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship, that the amendments made by the Senate to Bill C-29, a second act to implement certain provisions of the budget tabled in Parliament on March 22nd, 2016, and other measures be now read a second time and concurred in. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Hear, hear.
Ms. Chager for Mr. Morneau, seconded by Mr. McCallum, moves that the amendment made by the Senate to Bill C-29, a second act to implement certain provisions of the budget tabled in Parliament on March 22, 2016, and other measures be now read a second time and concurred in. Debate. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to add my voice to all the others to wishing you a Merry Christmas and enlightening us every day that we can spend with you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank also the colleagues who are with us today on this momentous day and the amazing colleagues. Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Speaker,
will watch this debate and will watch this speech will understand why this is so important on this last day of sitting of this House, Mr. Speaker. Because we're doing something special for Canadians and something that they will remember. Monsieur le Président, chers collègues.
Mr. Speaker, dear colleagues, parliamentarians on both sides of the House, because I think that this speech is one that can bring together the interests of all parliamentarians, because it's a speech for the middle class, for Canadian families, for the people who sent us to Ottawa. And there are some in all ridings of Canada. Of course, I'm very pleased to be here to talk about the Budget Implementation Act. Before I highlight the very numerous advantages of this budget for Canadians throughout the country, I would simply like to reiterate the government's commitment to strengthening the current consumer protection measures when it comes to financial services. We've talked about this issue a great deal, and in this speech, I'd like to clarify our position here in the government. It's also our commitment to making sure there's a solid and effective, uniform system throughout the country to guarantees the highest standards of protection for all consumers of financial products and services, regardless of where they live in Canada, regardless of which bank they deal with. Now, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to point out first and foremost, as a member of Parliament for Quebec, I'd like to salute the extraordinary work of my colleagues, the 40 members from Quebec here on the government side, who explained very clearly the position of Quebecers on this important issue. I thank them for that. They have played the role for which citizens sent them here to Ottawa, and they greatly contributed to making this issue what it is and making sure that we take into account all the voices that express themselves on this issue. I really want to thank my colleague for that. As you know, Mr. Speaker, we listened to our Quebec colleagues and to Quebecers themselves, who told us to what extent it's important for them that there be one single high standard of protection in the banking sector in Quebec and all across the country. We listen to Quebecers. For members of Quebec who sent us here, that's why the government House Leader, Senator Harder, tabled a motion to withdraw the current provisions about the banking sector, and that is the consumer protection measures in this bill, so that we can ask the ACFC to make sure that the federal protection regime is as solid as any provincial system. And thus, we can make sure that our objective, the objective we've had since the beginning, which is to have the highest global protection for all Canadians across the country, be achieved in a manner that achieves our objectives and protects consumers in Canada. That has what's led us to action from the beginning. And thanks to the intervention of all colleagues, we managed to put in place, or will put in place, the best possible system, always with the objective of defending the higher interest of consumers. Mr. Speaker, consumers deserve a national banking system that is standardized and easy to understand, a banking system that has high standards of consumer protection, and that is designed for the consumers of products and services in banks, and that apply the same way no matter where they live. We are strongly committed to strengthening consumer protection measures, facilitate access to basic banking, and improve the rules around current commercial practices that govern how banks treat their clients. We mustn't forget, Mr. Speaker, the creation of new obligations for banks to strengthen the disclosure requirements, to improve dealing with complaints, and strengthening governance and accountability for the organization with a view to protecting consumers. Our objective is a simple one. It's to make the consumer protection system easier to understand and prevent having consumers having to consult many sets of rules about banking, whether they deal with the bank in person or online. We want to increase the obligations placed on banks and make them accountable for improving results for consumers and treat these consumers in a fair manner across the country. Mr. Speaker, that's why we will be working with stakeholders and the provinces to ensure that the framework is strengthened to satisfy the highest standards. That was our objective at the outset, and we're going to achieve that, Mr. Speaker, with the sole goal of protecting consumers across the country. According to the Constitution, banks come under federal jurisdiction, and that has been the case for 150 years. So that responsibility means making sure that banks are solid and to establish rules about their operations so that they can respond to the needs of Canadians, of course. To do that, we have to have a rigorous consumer protection system for banks that applies the same way across the country. I know that you understand this issue full well, Mr. Speaker. The improvements being proposed will allow for a broader range of identification documents needed to open an account or to cash a Government of Canada check. And that's one of the measures that affects the people who sent us here to Ottawa. I can tell you there are people in my riding, in regions further north from my riding, the Aboriginal areas of my province, who will benefit from this because they have difficulty accessing banking. They have trouble cashing a government check. That system will allow them to have better access to banking services. The rules we are putting in place also add a new prohibition on undue pressure on consumers and would increase waiver times for a wider range of services. Disclosure would be necessary for a wider range of services, and accountability will be improved because of obligations on banks to take into account the challenges of the most vulnerable Canadians. There'd be also a requirement to improve the management of complaints so that banks and external organizations take into account the number of complaints and their nature and report on them. Banks would have to answer for their actions. We know that consumers are better protected when the rules and rights are clearly established for all stakeholders. Moreover, it's easier to make sure that banks are accountable when the rules are clear and exhaustive and apply nationally, and when compliance is ensured by a regulatory body that is federal and that is designated as is the organization we have here. We promise to protect the interests of middle-class Canadians and those who aspire to it, and we will continue to do so, Madam Speaker, notably in the case of consumer protection for financial products and services. Madam Speaker, I also want to underscore how law number 2 for budget implementation will help us achieve our objective to grow the economy so that families, workers, and the most vulnerable in our society can benefit. Strengthening the middle class and the implementation of measures to have sustainable growth are the major priority of this government. As you know, Madam Speaker, tax equity is a very important part of our commitments, and to help the tax system contribute to an economy that helps the entire population. I only have a few moments left, Madam Speaker, on this memorable day, but I urge all members to reflect on who sent them to Ottawa today, be it young people or seniors, workers, families, the people who work in each of our ridings. All those people sent us here with a mission, Madam Speaker, that is to represent their interests properly. And in the Budget Implementation Act number 2, you will see favors that will favor the people who sent us to Ottawa. Each of the members of Parliament should vote in favor because they will vote for the people who sent them here. It's a memorable day for Canada, Madam Speaker, and everyone will remember the day where we rose to work for Canadians.
Questions et commentaires.
Questions and comments.
Comments, l'honorable député de...
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'll have an opportunity in a few moments to respond to the rather creative arguments of the Parliamentary Secretary, but, Madam Speaker, I'd like to put a question to the Minister. I'm sorry, that was a Freudian slip, but nonetheless telling. My question is this. The Minister indicated 2 days ago that he'll come back a little later with new legislation regarding the question of banks and consumer protection. Can the Parliamentary Secretary assure us that the next time he rises to table a bill, he will have obtained the consent, even the technical consent, of all the provinces, especially Quebec, which, as we know, house the most rigorous and solid consumer protection regime in the country? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance. Madam Speaker, first of all, I'd like to thank my colleague for Louis Saint Laurent, for whom I have a great deal of respect, and salute him and his entire family during the holidays, as well as other colleagues who contributed throughout the year to make sure that we work for Canadians. To get back to his question, what we have to remind the House of, and my honourable colleague, who is very familiar with the issues before us, the objective we've had from the start was to present Canadians with a regulatory framework that best protects consumers, be it in Quebec or everywhere else in the country. And I can assure my colleague that during that period, we consulted the provinces, we consulted various organizations. We will continue to consult in order to have a legislative framework that is the best possible. Madam Speaker, I can assure you that every time we rose here in this House, it was precisely to ensure the protection of consumers, because it is in their interest to have a regime that protects us. That's what animates us today, and will continue to do so when we table the next bill. Thank you. Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for Rimouski, Neigette, Témiscouata-les-Masques. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'd like to continue in that vein because the member for Louis Saint Laurent put a direct question. The government did not listen for 2-3 weeks. The opposition had arguments, the Chamber of Notaries, the Senate, consumer organizations. They didn't listen to the fact that what was proposed in C-29 reduced consumer protection and interfered in Quebec jurisdiction. The question by the member for Louis Saint Laurent was, the minister seems to indicate that he will come back with new legislation to protect consumers. Whereas this is a matter of provincial jurisdiction, the question is not whether the government will do that or not. If it votes for that, will it make sure that it has the consent of the provinces, including Quebec, to make sure there is no interference in areas of provincial jurisdiction? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance. Madam Speaker, on this memorable day, I'd like to salute my colleague because he is a very important member of the Finance Committee. He also had a chance to examine this bill, and I can confirm to him that the officials always consulted various provinces, including Quebec colleagues, and I can assure him that we listen, Madam Speaker. We listen to consumers in Quebec. We also listen to the 40 Liberal members on this side from Quebec who told us about their concerns and the concerns they heard from their constituents, and that's why we agreed to take time out to make sure we presented Quebecers and all Canadians the best possible system to protect them when it comes to banking across the country. The Honourable Member for Joliette.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My colleague talks about a federal protection system that will be as robust as the Quebec system. Does he intend to put in place a system that will be as voluminous as the Quebec Consumer Protection Law, which is 117 pages plus the schedules at the federal level? Because when there are legal proceedings, that goes through the civil code. Can he give us that assurance today to ensure that his affirmation is true? That is, that the federal protection system will be as robust as the one that exists in Quebec? Thank you, Madam Speaker. A brief response from the Parliamentary Secretary, please. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to commend my colleague and to thank him for his contribution. Madam Speaker, this is a brief answer. We will be continue to listen and work with all partners and the different provinces to ensure that at the end of the day we have the best protection system possible in place for consumers. And that is what has motivated us from the outset. We are going to continue to listen to all partners and work together to propose Quebec, to give Quebecers the best system possible. Before continuing, I would also like to say Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to everyone, because I don't know if I'll have another opportunity, and I am really happy to be able to work with all of you. I know that sometimes we have our disagreements, but this is the time of year to rise above all that and to express my best wishes. Resuming debate, the honourable member for Louis Saint Laurent. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and on behalf of all my colleagues, I accept your very kind wishes, and I express my wishes as well to all parliamentarians. Madam Speaker, I have a great deal of a pleasure to rise here in this House, and especially today. I am very happy to speak in order to support the amendment that was presented by the Senate concerning Bill C-29. I was not in agreement with all of the bill, but this amendment is a happy day for this House. Madam Speaker, you may have noticed that, where everyone tries to take credit, it's thanks to me, it's thanks to him, but the reality, Madam Speaker, is that all of Canada, all Canadians are winners. So congratulations. First, I'd like to commend my colleague from Joliette, who on November 17th, if I remember correctly, was the first to raise this issue and to bring this debate to committee and to the House of Commons. I'd also like to commend my colleague from the NDP, Rimouski, Neigette et Misquote-les-Basques. You know what I think of federal riding names. He's got a very long riding name, but he does excellent work, Madam Speaker. Also, Madam Speaker, I'd like to commend the fact that the government, after, being a bit vague on things, finally heard reason and made the right decision. It's not always easy, Madam Speaker, in politics to walk the fine line and to recognize that one has made a mistake. It's never easy, but the government did so, and I'd like to thank it for that. I'd also like to commend my colleagues, the senators, especially Senator Carignan, the leader of the official opposition in the Senate, Senator Pratt, who's a new senator, a new independent senator. Both of those gentlemen told the government about the problem that consumer protection was causing in Bill C-29. Essentially, Madam Speaker, to sum it up very quickly, Bill C-29 had a virus, a constitutional virus, because there were a number of clauses, in fact, an entire section, Section 5, that directly affected consumer protection, which, in our viewpoint, was a question of provincial jurisdiction. And after many calls from the opposition parties here in the House and then from the Senate, but also, Madam Speaker, from the National Assembly of Quebec, which in a unanimous motion called on the government to fix this, from the Premier of Quebec himself, who said that if this bill is adopted in its current form, it is likely that the Quebec government will bring the federal government to court. So, thanks to the sacrifices to everyone, the government finally came to its senses and cooperated, and at the end, we are all happily together here today.
History about this bill. We have to get back to 2012, when at that time the federal government tabled and the House of Commons adopted a bill that covered a lot of issues and addressed a lot of issues about banking system. As you know, Madam Speaker, banking system belongs to the federal government, yes. But in the part of this bill in 2012, we had this bill addressed some issue about the protection of consumer. And then at that time, in 2012, the National Assembly, we were aware of that. I'm using the word we, because I was there at the time. I was member of the National Assembly, and maybe to remind you some good or some bad memories for many colleagues. But the reality is that I was one of them who voted for a unanimous resolution in the National Assembly calling the House of Commons saying that the protection of consumer belongs to the provincial jurisdiction, not the federal one. Then, in 2014, the Supreme Court decided in the Arrêt Marcotte, the Supreme Court clearly identified the protection of consumer, all of that belongs to the provincial power, not the federal one. C'est ainsi, Madame la Présidente, que notre...
Madam Speaker, that is how our government at the time recognized the Supreme Court decision of 2014 and intended to make an adjustment to avoid what we have seen over the past weeks, that is a bill that once again encroached on provincial jurisdiction with regard to federal authority. And unfortunately, Madam Speaker, the government in Bill C-29, which I might remind you is the bill that implements the budget, and I'll come back to that, a bad Liberal budget, well, what we identified was that constitutional virus, because it was clear, Madam Speaker, that we were headed straight for a brick wall, and the only thing that we would have gained out of that was paying a lot of money to lawyers because who knew that in advance that it was a lost cause, because the Supreme Court had said in 2014 that consumer protection is under a provincial jurisdiction, and yet the federal government wanted to keep it as a federal jurisdiction, and so we were headed straight for a wall. So we would have been back back to the drawing board. So luckily the government came to its senses and heard reason. Madam Speaker, Bill C-29 did have this constitutional flaw. That's been corrected. But the fact remains that it is a bad bill because it puts in place the bad measures of the bad Liberal budget. And Madam Speaker, I'm going to shed a bit of light on this. Let us recall that this budget puts forward a deficit of $30 billion, 3 times higher than the Liberal promise. And let's remember what the Liberal government said at the time. Oh, tiny little budgets of tiny little deficits of $10 billion, and then boom, we'll be right back to a balanced budget. And now we're talking about a deficit of $30 billion. And when are we going to return to a balanced budget? Well, probably once the Conservatives are back in power. Not until then, I don't think. Madam Speaker, this government boasted about doing things in a fair way, in a balanced way, that there were going to be tax changes, that Canadians would be treated more fairly. Does the government realize that 65% of Canadians are not affected by these tax changes? That anyone who earns more than $45,000 or less get nothing out of this budget? Does the government know that the people who benefit from these so-called tax breaks are people who earn between $45,000 and $90,000 a year? Is that the middle class, Madam Speaker? No. But I do have a conflict of interest. As an MP, I am one of the most privileged people under this budget, and I will ensure that I pay less taxes, but that's not the right thing to do. We're talking about the middle class. We're talking about people who earn $40,000 a year. That's the middle class, and yet the government gives them no tax cuts at all. So all this rhetoric where the government tries to tell us that it's trying to help the middle class, well, that's just not true. The people who need these tax breaks the most don't get them under this budget. Madam Speaker, the time is flying by, and I certainly don't want to get too passionate. That's not my style. But so let me get back to this, Madam Speaker. This is the holiday season, and we know that when we got into politics, we did so for the future generations, and we are the heirs of what our parents have done, and we have to do the same thing for the future of our children. This is the 4th time that I've been elected, either with the National Assembly or in the House of Commons. And when I go to vote, I come with my parents and my children because voting is part of my political commitment. I am there thanks to my parents and for my children. So, Madam Speaker, in closing, I would like to commend those, the people who've made it possible for me to be here tomorrow. Is their 65th anniversary of marriage, so I would like to commend my parents. Madam Speaker, we might get carried away a bit, but, I'm just like that, and I'm happy to take questions. So I would also like to wish your parents a very happy 65th anniversary of marriage. That's a great number of years. Questions and comments, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance. Madam Speaker, first and foremost, I would like to congratulate the parents of the member for Louis-Saint-Laurent. I hope they're listening to us. But, Madam Speaker, the only virus that people were suffering from was the conservative virus. Luckily, they found the cure on October 19th, 2015, and that's what all Canadians voted for. There are people who are watching us on TV today, people who live in the riding of Louis-Hébert, the riding of Louis-Saint-Laurent, where my colleague lives, and people are watching TV, and they want to know, what is C-29? Well, it's a tax break for 9 million people who live in his riding, people who are watching us on TV today. And they are waiting to see whether this member is going to vote for or against their tax breaks. There are people in Lévis-Lotbinière. My mother lives there. How about the Canada Child Benefit? 9 families out of 10 in this country are going to benefit from it. Those are people who live in Louis-Saint-Laurent. And so will the member for Louis-Saint-Laurent say yes or no to our seniors receiving checks? Madam Speaker, we enhanced the retirement fund. Also, and they live in Louis-Saint-Laurent as well. Is he going to vote yes or no for the seniors in Louis-Saint-Laurent? I hope he'll do the right thing, Madam Speaker. The honourable member for Louis-Saint-Laurent. Madam Speaker, never am I going to vote for a budget that means that the deficit is 3 times higher than planned. And I've asked this question 14 times, but never have I received an answer. When are we going to return to a balanced budget? Of course, I'm going to vote against a budget that is going to it doesn't differentiate or doesn't make a difference for 65% of Canadians who earn $40,000 and less. But if you make over $100,000 a year, then you'll benefit from this so-called middle-class tax break. Yes, Madam Speaker, I'm going to vote against a budget that means that the Canada Child Benefit is out of control. We had benefits that were part of a balanced budget. This government tabled child benefits that are not even indexed. So anyone who works for a small business, if they had, if anyone else put in something in place without indexation, they'd be fired. And this government in 3 years will be fired. The honourable member for Rimouski-Néchet-Témiscouata-Les Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And I'd like to thank my colleague from Louis-Saint-Laurent. He's so entertaining. And I'd like to congratulate his parents, because my parents are going to celebrate their 60th anniversary in just a few months. I'd like to put a question to my colleague, once again, with regard to jurisdiction. I'm going to talk about that in my upcoming speech, but I'm truly concerned about the fact that the government doesn't seem to understand the message that was sent. Consumer protection that they want to strengthen federally is a matter of provincial jurisdiction. So I can't reconcile this government's will to continue to go forward with such a bill, whereas we're talking about provincial jurisdiction, and I'd like to hear what my colleague has to say on this, because it's really going to influence, I hope, the direction that the government takes on this matter. The honourable member for Louis-Saint-Laurent. Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I'd also like to congratulate the love that my colleagues' parents have for each other. Now, he's raised a very important point. The government has finally understood over the past little while that consumer protection is under provincial jurisdiction, but the banks are under federal jurisdiction. Now, they talked about consulting, and then all of a sudden in April and May, they might forget about that. I hope so. Let's gain some time, my friends. If that's what you want, we're happy with that. But remember the Minister, Jean-Marc Fournier. You know him. He's the former political advisor. So I'm urging the members to call Jean-Marc Fournier. He's a good friend of mine. He's so liberal that he's redder than the Canada flag. But he's going to tell them, don't touch this. This is under provincial jurisdiction. So I think this is one of the most vehement and vigorous days that we've had in a little while. Everyone is really out in force. Resuming debate, the honourable member for Rimouski-Néchet-Témiscouata-Les Basques. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I am rising for the last time in 2016 in this House to, first of all, wish everyone in this House, especially colleagues with whom I sit on the Finance Committee. I'd like to wish everyone a very happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year 2017, and I do hope that you're able to rest up over these few weeks. However, Madam Speaker, my last statements are not necessarily going to be very praiseworthy of the government. We've seen a historic moment over the past few weeks because the government backed down. The parliamentary secretary, in my opinion, should just go back and read through the Hansards in considering the responses that he gave in this House, further to the discussions that we had in Finance Committee, to see that the 40 Quebec members on that side, that the government as a whole said absolutely nothing about jurisdiction over consumer protection. And to date, the responses that he gave only 2 days ago, before the minister announced that he was flip-flopping on the topic, still defended the government's decision to go forward with Division number 5 on the amendment to the Banks Act. Now, Madam Speaker, that is a problem, and it is troubling to see that the government, even though that it has consented to withdraw this section, thanks to the opposition parties in this House, and I'd like to commend the Bloc Québécois, the Conservative Party, and obviously the work done by the NDP. But I'd also like to congratulate the Senate because they decided that they wouldn't give up, and that is, I'm talking about Senator André Pratt, the consumer agencies that we invited in committee, so that they could tell us about the concerns that they had with regard to consumer protection and federal intrusion into this matter. Those are people who ensured that the government did back down on this matter. Now, why is this a fundamental matter? Well, I'm worried because the government doesn't seem to understand the main message. It's not a question about protecting Canadians, protecting them well or not. The question is that consumer protection is under provincial jurisdiction. And in the comments that the government is making, it is clear that the minister is trying to sidestep this whole situation and reintroduce a bill regarding consumer protection that is not under his jurisdiction. This is a matter of provincial jurisdiction. Now, when the government tries to interpret the Marcotte decision, it was a class action suit, and these people went to court to protest against foreign transaction fees that were too high. And so they went to the Supreme Court to complain about that, and ultimately all banks said, well, listen, we don't have to obey the consumer protection law because we are under federal jurisdiction. So the case went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and unlike what the government insisted on saying, is that the Supreme Court did not ask the government to clarify its jurisdiction. The Supreme Court said that the Consumer Protection Law applied and that the Bank Act applied and that both of them could collaborate. They could cohabit because they were complementary. The Banks Act affects the operation of different banking programs, while the Consumer Protection Act affects, obviously, consumer protection. So what the Marcotte ruling stated was that the Consumer Protection Act did apply. It never, ever asked the government to look at that matter or clarify anything at all, or to take control of consumer protection for Quebec or for all of the provinces. And why is this a problem? What creates the problem with regard to the jurisdiction, and what creates the problem with regard to the section they're going to be withdrawing? Well, because it creates a conflict between the Federal Act and the Provincial Act. The principle of federal paramountcy exists, and that is when there are two pieces of legislation that affect two different levels of government. That is where the federal legislation becomes paramount. However, the Supreme Court ruling in Marcotte said that there was no conflict, and by trying to recuperate these powers and by trying to impose its will, a conflict was created by the federal government with regard to the Consumer Protection Act. So now we are talking about the doctrine of federal paramountcy. That's where it came up. So that is where the government's argument failed. And that is the type of argument that consumer protection agencies in particular, as raised by the Quebec Bar and the Chamber of Notaries, that the government was trying to encroach on provincial jurisdiction and create a problem where none exists. So that is why we are very happy to see that they have withdrawn Division 5, that all opposition parties agreed to examine this, and where Quebec insisted on this. The government saw that there was a major problem. The Quebec government saw there was a major problem. It called on the federal government to amend this and to withdraw these provisions. And the civil society groups did this as well. So finally, the government heard reason.
And we hope that they will learn a lesson from what happened in this case. And that they will keep that in mind when they're making future decisions that might create problems in terms of jurisdiction. So I hope the Liberals will take some time over the holidays to re-energize and to think about this. So in any case, I'm very happy to have been able to play even a small role in this decision, as I know some other opposition members did. And finally, I'd like to partly reply to what was said by the government. They often talk about the 9 million Canadians who are going to benefit from their tax cut. But there are still 23 million Canadians who earn under $45,000 a year who won't get any benefits. So I hope the government can be a little bit more honest in the future. Yes, they cut taxes. Yes, they raise taxes on the wealthiest 1%, but they're not helping the entire middle class. They're basically still giving a lot to the 9% of the wealthiest Canadians. As my colleague said, people earning under $45,000 a year won't get much of a benefit. Those who earn $45,000 to $90,000 will get a bit of a cut, but most of those who benefit from the cut will be earning over $90,000. And even those who earn over $200,000 a year will have a cut, while as those who earn only $45,000 really get nothing. This is one of the problems with the Liberal plan. Sorry, I almost said conservative there, but I meant Liberal. Of course, I get mixed up sometimes. But we tried to correct the situation by proposing that people earning over $11,000 a year could benefit, but the government refused. Something else that my colleague for Louis Saint-Laurent mentioned is that when the Canada Child Benefit Program was set up, the government forgot to index it. Oops. Well, that was a major problem, because that lack of indexation meant that the program would have helped families much less starting in about 2022-2023. So we have the Parliamentary Budget Officer to thank for conducting a very rigorous study on the subject. Now, the report that his report was published, the government said, oh, of course we're going to index it. We'll start indexing it around 2020-2021, after the next federal election. Can we really believe the government? They had never mentioned indexation before when the program was announced or when it was implemented. It took a public report from the PBO to show that the lack of indexation would make the government program less beneficial within a period of 6 years. So even with the amendments in C-29, we are again in a situation where purchasing power will be getting dangerously low, in fact, dangerously close to what it would have been under the previous program. So rather than bragging about their different initiatives, which will affect different groups of Canadians to varying degrees, instead of doing that, I would like to express my hope that we will have more rigorous debates in this House in 2017, more economically rigorous debates. I'm an economist after all, and I'd like to have less partisanship. Now, it's normal that we work in an adversarial system and that we have different partisan positions, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be more rigorous in carrying out our duties. That's what I hope for 2017. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Questions and comments? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance. Madam Speaker, I listened with great interest to my colleague's speech. I believe he's from Rimouski, Nejet, Témiscouata-les-Basques. Yes, I think that's right. Forgive me if I didn't get that right. But, Madam Speaker, I think that we are all taking a step forward. Society has taken a step forward here, not backwards. Our objective from the very beginning was to provide the best system possible to all consumers. I know that my colleague sits on the Finance Committee, and he speaks a lot about this issue. But perhaps we should also look at the Hansard. During the Finance Committee, people spoke about this issue, and I would tell my colleague, as we enter this holiday season and as we approach the new year, well, I hope that he will help work with us to give not just Quebecers, but all Canadians the best consumer protection system possible. We're not talking about having a lower protection system. We're talking about looking at best practices all across the country and allowing all consumers to benefit from them. That's our goal, Madam Speaker, and I hope that my colleague will help with that. If he sits in Ottawa, I'm sure he wants to offer the same protections that exist in Canada to all Canadians. So for 2017, I hope that we can benefit from his good ideas so that we can allow all Canadians to have the best consumer protection system possible so that they're protected against the banks. Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Honourable Member for Rimouski-Nejet-Témiscouata-les-Basques. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to thank my colleague, for whom I have a lot of respect, and I want to wish him a happy holidays and a happy 2017. Indeed, we're here to work for Quebecers and Canadians. The problem with his argument is that, yeah, of course, as a politician, I want to improve the fate of consumers. But if you take this argument to its logical conclusion, do we want the government to provide the best education to everyone in Canada? Well, that's not the federal government's role. The government deals with health, but the provinces deal with education. And there are federal and provincial jurisdictions, and consumer protection is a provincial jurisdiction. That's what I want the Parliamentary Secretary and the Minister in the Department to understand before they bring forward yet another consumer protection proposal. The Supreme Court was clear. There is no conflict between the Loi sur les banques and the Consumer Protection Act in Quebec. So why create a conflict by bringing federal legislation to a provincial system that already works well? We want provinces, of course, to have a good system like the one we have in Quebec. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I appreciate my colleague's speech, my colleague for Rimouski-Nejet-Témiscouata-les-Basques. I almost forgot Les Basques. But it's Christmas. I'm sure he'll forgive me for forgetting one part of his riding name, as important as it is. Madam Speaker, I heard my colleagues speaking about the surprise that we all felt at seeing that no Liberal MP realized that this clause in Bill C-29 concerning the Quebec Consumer Protection Act was there. So I'd like to know, how can we improve consumer protection for all Canadians by withdrawing the protections that they already had in one of the provinces? I have a hard time understanding the government's argument on this, and I'd like to know if the MP came to the same conclusion as me. In other words, that no Liberal from Quebec noticed this error in C-29, and they're just lucky that the opposition was there. The Honourable Member for Rimouski, brief answer, please. Thank you very much. Thank you to my colleague. I'd like to thank all of my colleagues who are making a valiant effort to pronounce my riding name. I'd like to say hi to everyone from Les Pistoles and Les Basques who are in my riding. Now, it's true, unfortunately, there was no Liberal Quebec MP who spoke up about this, no one who asked about it in committee. And even when we raised the question with organizations who represent consumers. And this is a problem because the government is trying to say, oh, we're doing this for the good of consumers. And now we heard a strong reaction, and so we're taking action. But it wasn't the Liberal MPs who did this. It was the opposition MPs who raised the issue. There was work done by the Senate, by the Assemblée nationale, and by various other stakeholders who were concerned by this issue. Resuming debate. The Honourable Member for Joliette. Thank you, Madam Speaker. You can't imagine how thrilled I am to be able to speak on behalf of my own amendments to C-29, because the motion that the government is dealing with today is due to the amendments that the Bloc Québécois presented at the Finance Committee at report stage. So I'm proud of that. I'm proud of our work, proud of our people who rolled up their sleeves and really mobilized. Experts, consumer defense groups, the National Assembly, journalists, everyone stepped up to the plate. And today, we can see that that paid off. It's not always easy to swim against the tide, but it's always worth trying. Now, there are also some people who probably aren't very proud today, and those are the 40 Liberal MPs from Quebec who voted for C-29 at second reading, who voted against our amendments twice rather than once in committee and in the House. They were the ones who were constantly saying that our criticisms didn't make any sense, that C-29 was excellent, and that our amendments were outlandish. Well, they're probably not very proud today, those 40 MPs. Madam Speaker, you've undoubtedly seen old RCA discs with the image of the dog and the speaker. Well, that dog is called Victor, and he's there because he's listening to the voice of his master. This is sort of what we've seen with the C-29. Greg, don't laugh. These are Liberal MPs listening to the voice of their master, and now it seems their master has abandoned them, and they've decided to adopt the Bloc's amendments. Well, there's nothing new about the Liberal MPs from Quebec listening to their master in Toronto. Here's what someone from my riding of Joliette said. There's a little boy from Saint-Alphonse who said the following. Beyond these events, there are much more fundamental questions that are raised here. Who does the Liberal Party leader turn to when it comes to issues that concern Quebec? Should he be talking to Quebecers, or should he be talking to his Toronto advisors who don't understand anything about the reality of the Quebec political landscape? Well, this guy from Saint-Alphonse knows what he's talking about. And who was this guy? Well, the former lieutenant of the Liberal Party of Quebec, Denis Coderre, who's now the mayor of Montreal. Madam Speaker, I'm proud, but I'm not triumphant today. In Canada, Quebec is not winning. It's like a bad TV show. The Minister of Finance has already announced that there will be yet another episode next year. He wants to come back with another proposal that's not quite so botched this time. He says he wants to strengthen the federal consumer protection system, and once he's done his homework, he'll come back, and he will once again be placing banks above Quebec laws. Well, I'll have to wish him good luck with that, because it won't be easy. To end up with a consumer protection system that is equivalent to the one that Quebecers currently have, he would have to write a new federal civil code. Either his new bill will not protect anyone, because it doesn't fall under federal jurisdiction, or else it will be unconstitutional, because contract law is also not federal jurisdiction. So it will either be ineffective or unconstitutional. What a dilemma. So good luck, Charlie Brown. Madam Speaker, 2017 will be a busy year, but we remain vigilant. Today, at least, I'm smiling, and I want to thank everyone who mobilized against the rich bankers and those who helped them, and who stood up on behalf of ordinary people. Thank you and bravo. I want to wish happy holidays to everyone here, Madam Speaker, and thank you very much for your good wishes for this holiday season. I would also like to send my best wishes and say happy holidays, happy New Year to all of the staff and all of my colleagues here. And Madam Speaker, happy holidays to you as well. Thank you. Questions and comments? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance. Madam Speaker, I thank the member for Joliette. I know that he's a man of great passion. I heard his speech and I have a lot of respect for him. But when he talks about being proud, I hope that his constituents in Joliette are watching, because I want to remind them that the first thing we did when we came to power was reducing taxes for 9 million Canadians. And there must be a few of those people in Joliette. I think I know a few of them. We created the Canada Child Benefit. 9 out of 10 families are being helped. And many of the Quebec Liberal MPs worked for that. I'm sure there's at least one family in Joliette who will benefit from that Canada Child Benefit. They're probably watching today, and I'll be happy to see them over the holidays. Madam Speaker, we strengthened our financial benefits for our seniors. Now, the member for Joliette is a passionate man, and I hope that he will vote in favor of helping at least a few seniors in his riding, because there are at least 900,000 of them across Canada, and I'm sure there are at least a few of them in Joliette. I can't imagine that's not the case. We've also made investments in infrastructure which people need. The member for Joliette, will he vote for Canadian families, for the middle class, for seniors, and for youth, Madam Speaker? That's the question. The Honourable Member for Joliette. Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for Saint-Maurice Champlain for his question. Indeed, in the Bloc Québécois, we're all passionate people. We're here to represent the people of our riding and the people of Quebec in this Parliament, and that's what we're doing. In C-29, there are some good measures. For example, a child care benefit, which is a good measure. When you talk about the tax cut for the middle class, it's really the upper middle class who's benefiting, and I'm part of the upper middle class. I must be among perhaps the 10% of the people in Joliette who will really benefit from this. But I'm thinking about the 90% of people who are not getting enough from this. Now, in C-29, of course, we're very happy with the amendments, but there's really too little for the middle class in this bill. And I'd like to remind this government that when you say you are the Robin Hood of Canada, that's really just a symbol. Behind that symbol, you can see the Sheriff of Nottingham, and we're there to take their masks off. Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Honourable Member for Sherbrooke. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank my colleague for his speech and for his work on this file. And I also want to wish him happy holidays. He put his finger on quite an important issue here, and that's the fact that the 40 Liberal MPs from Quebec rose at least once at report stage in the House to speak against my colleague's amendments, and we had presented similar amendments as well. Amendments that would eliminate Section 5 of the bill, which dealt with consumer protection. And several times in this House, the 40 Liberal MPs from Quebec stood up one by one to vote against these amendments that would have withdrawn that part of the bill. Now, today it seems people have woken up and they're saying, well, it turns out you're right. We should have withdrawn that provision of the bill when they previously had the opportunity to do so. So where were the Liberal MPs from Quebec when they had the opportunity to vote in favor of our amendments to withdraw that part of the bill? Where were they? The Honourable Member for Joliette. Madam Speaker, I want to thank the member for Sherbrooke for his question and for all of the hard work he does in the House, and I'd also like to wish him happy holidays. Where were the Liberal MPs from Quebec when this question was raised, when it was raised in committee? Well, first of all, they were trying to ram it through, and there was a member for Gatineau who stood up to ferociously make fun of our amendments. There were many different aspects that were discussed, and he was really ridiculing my amendments, saying that they were outlandish and frivolous. Fortunately, we didn't lose heart. We continued to work with the Quebec government, the National Assembly, consumer protection groups, notaries, lawyers, and opposition MPs. And eventually, the Liberal MPs to ask them to take action. And fortunately, today, we can see that the situation has changed. We're still vigilant, and we still want to make sure that provincial jurisdiction is respected and that these provisions will be withdrawn in 2017. So we're staying vigilant for 2017 as we were in 2016. Thank you.
Pursuant to order made earlier today, the motion is deemed adopted.
Orders of the day. Ordre du jour.
Ordre émanant du gouvernement. Projet de loi émanant du gouvernement, Sénat. Considération en troisième lecture du projet de loi S4.
Resuming debate on Bill S4 regarding tax arrangements.
Earlier today, Mr. Sohi for Mr. Morneau, seconded by Mr. McCallum, moves that Bill S4, an act to implement a convention and an arrangement for the avoidance of double taxation and the prevention of fiscal evasion with respect to taxes on income, and to amend an act in respect of a similar agreement, be now read a third time and do pass. Debate. L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance. Madam Speaker, I thank you. I think this will be one of the last speeches, if not the last speech of this session ending today. Before I proceed, I'd like to point out that we went through a historic step. I know that when we're all retired here and we can benefit from the improved plan, we'll remember this historic day when we made a step forward for Canadian society by enhancing the rights of our seniors, our youth, and the middle class. It's a great day for the country. Madam Speaker, allow me to talk about Bill S4, which is also an important issue here.
To speak about Bill S4, a tax convention and an arrangement implementation act. And I know a number of members of this House have spoken already on this important bill as well. This is in the best interest of Canada. This is about making sure that we grow our economy. This is about tax fairness. People understand the objective, and I think all members in this House will be supporting this bill because that's the right thing to do for Canada. But it's also, Madam Speaker, the smart thing to do for Canadians, because Canadians have given us a mandate to grow the economy and to make sure that we do engage with our trading partner, whether it's the State of Israel, whether it's the jurisdiction of Taiwan or Hong Kong, that we work with them in order to grow our economy. And this is what I'm going to be talking about today. And I seek the support of every member because they know that we need to send our notice before the end of the year in order for these arrangements and these agreements to come into force in 2018. So I really seek the support of my colleagues, and like I said, this is probably one of the last speech. But this is also a very important issue, not because it's last, Madam Speaker. This is very important for Canada. This is important for our trade relationship with Taiwan, with the State of Israel, and obviously Hong Kong. As Canada's economy is increasingly intertwined with that of the global economy, the importance of eliminating tax impediments to international trade and investment has grown in importance. And I think every member in this House understands that. Whether you sit as a Conservative or NDP or Liberal, you must understand that trade and the Bloc, my colleagues from the Bloc, my friends from the Bloc, I should say, understands that. Everyone understands that it's in our best interest, obviously, to invest in making sure that we can have more trade, Madam Speaker, but trade that is fair and also that is about tax fairness. One of the ways to remove these impediments is through tax treaties or double taxation agreements. These treaties are used internationally to eliminate tax barriers to trade and investment. Canada's network of 92 income tax treaties currently in force is one of the most extensive in the world. And that's something we should be proud of as Canadians, because we are a trading nation, a fair trading nation, Madam Speaker. But as with any measure of efficiency, there is an ongoing need to update and modernize this network with foreign jurisdictions. By modernizing our tax treaties and expanding our network, we will be helping facilitate international trade and making it easier for our treaty partners to invest in Canada. Because that's the mandate we've been given, Madam Speaker. People who have sent us in this House expect us to be here to grow the economy, to create jobs for Canadians, jobs all across our nation, jobs in every riding in this country. That's why they sent us here, because they want us to work for them. And that's why I hope my colleagues from the NDP, from the Bloc, from the Conservative, will join in supporting that, because they too, I am sure, Madam Speaker, believe in creating jobs for Canadians. Madam Speaker, this will help our economy and our businesses and strengthen our middle class. And, you know, I still believe, Madam Speaker, that everyone in this House should be working with us to help the middle class. There is nothing more important in this country that we can do to support our middle class, support our families, support our youth and our seniors. Sur la scène internationale, l'économie...
On the international scene, the Canadian economy is also always facing headwinds, but we can count on solid basis that allows us to seize opportunities presented by the modern economy.
Seconds left before we adjourn. I just want to wish every member Merry Christmas. Thank you for working with us, for making sure that we do what matters to Canadians. Let's always remember, whenever we rise in this House, to raise our voice or to bring something, that we do it on behalf of the people, the good people who have sent us here, to make a difference in their life, not just for the current state of affairs, Madam Speaker, but for the future. Canadians expect the best, and I'll quote our Prime Minister, better is always possible. So let us work together in 2017 to make sure that we strive, Madam Speaker, to always be at our best, not for ourselves, but for the very people that we serve and have sent us in Ottawa, because these people expect the best out of us, and that's what we will deliver. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Point of order, the honourable member for Regina Capel.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I believe you'll find unanimous consent to allow me to table petition. I know with all the Christmas greetings that went on after question period, I wasn't able to do this during routine proceedings. It's a very well thought out petition from members of constituents of mine, petitioning the government on the subject of community TV and media, calling for support for local media in small communities. I'd like unanimous consent to table this.
So does the honourable member have the unanimous consent of the House to to table the document? They must be in the Christmas spirit. The honourable member for Regina Capel, tabling of a petition.
Just explain. It's a petition from my riding, Madam Speaker, for many residents who are concerned about community TV and media in rural and remote locations, and they call on the government to support and ensure the survival of community TV. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Resuming debate, reprise de débat, l'honorable député de Mégantic.
The honourable member for Mégantic-Lirab. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. First of all, I'd like to thank my colleagues for their cooperation, for the tabling of my colleague's petition. I think it's a nice gesture on the eve of Christmas. I'd also want to point out that we really are in the Christmas spirit, because we felt in the last speech we heard the land toward a true Christmas spirit expressed here. And yet, Madam Speaker, I'm a little bit torn tonight between the joy of going back to my riding for Christmas and the sadness I feel regarding my colleague's speech about C-29. He said himself that someday we will remember Bill C-29. Well, Madam Speaker, unfortunately our young people will remember when they have to pay $100 billion in deficit that Bill C-29 will leave. That's what we're going to leave them. And indeed, $100 billion in deficit, they'll remember that a long, long time. That's why I cannot share my colleague's enthusiasm that he shared so well. Now, let's get back to the debate before us, the very important Bill S-4, to implement a convention to avoid double taxation and prevent fiscal invasion with respect to taxes on income, and to amend an act in respect of a similar agreement. I'd like to point out the work of the member for Louis Saint-Laurent on this file. When you're talking about tax conventions, for Canadians, this is something quite obscure. We're here in Ottawa, we rise to talk about subjects that may not be very interesting at first glance, but tax convention, free trade agreements between countries is what provides jobs for Canadians. That's what provides jobs for our young, and that's important because the market is global in our day, and we have to salute efforts made by all members in this House who over the years have done colossal work so that we have more and more free trade agreements signed under our previous Prime Minister, Stephen Harper. There were many free trade agreements, Madam Speaker. Free trade agreements with Europe, free trade agreement with Peru, Jordan, Colombia, Honduras, Panama, South Korea. We also signed others under the government, Austria, Belgium, Bulgaria, Croatia, Cyprus, Czech Republic, Denmark, Estonia, Finland, France, Germany, Greece, Hungary, Italy, Latvia, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Malta, Netherlands, Romania, UK, Spain, Sweden, all these countries are ones that the Santa Claus will be visiting in the next few days, and he will surely bring the children of those countries presents that may have been made here in Canada. Why? Because there are free trade agreements that allow Canadian companies, through Santa Claus perhaps, to export their products to other countries. That is the advantage of free trade agreements. Now, with regard to our relations with Israel, Madam Speaker, when it comes to trade, let me remind you that in 1996, trade between Canada and Israel were $507 million. In 2012, they were worth $1.4 billion. And Bill S4 seeks to allow companies to avoid having to pay taxes in both countries if they deal in both countries, so they don't have to pay tax in both. So if we don't want to create new costs for these companies and put a brake on the increase in trade and investment that we have with Israel, it's important to give these companies a trade environment that is easy and especially that doesn't penalize them. Now, I wanted to read an excerpt from the press release that was issued by the former Prime Minister, Mr. Harper, about the advantages of signing trade agreements with Israel, among others. Unfortunately, all Mr. Harper's press releases were withdrawn from the website by the current government, so unfortunately I can't read it, but I certainly share Mr. Harper's intentions of the time to sign agreements so that Canadians can benefit as much as possible. Resuming debate, the Honourable Member for Sherbrooke. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm very pleased to speak to this bill, S4, on third reading. And I want to take advantage of this opportunity to wish you a Merry Christmas, Madam Speaker. And I know I'll be just about the last to speak in the House. I know my colleague for Pierre Boucher, Verchères les Patriotes, will be the last. He will close the debates in the House. But I do want to express my best wishes, Madam Speaker. This is not the most controversial bill we're discussing right now, and thanks to the cooperation of all parties, the government managed to push it forward very quickly in the deliberations of this House and of committee. All parties cooperated so that this can go forth quickly. We know that the government uses this excuse that if a bill isn't, if you don't have a royal assent before December 31st, the convention with Taiwan can't come into effect January 1st. And if it doesn't on January 1st, you have to wait for the following January 1st, 2018. So that's why they push this forward, even though we have some reservations about tax conventions as a whole. But in this case, there is no problem with this new one with Taiwan and the update of the one with Israel that we already concluded in 2015. So it's just an update, a technical update for Hong Kong as well, to clarify Hong Kong's status as a jurisdiction in China. So it goes without saying that we support this and we allow the government to go forward and soon allow the Governor General to sign off and give royal assent. And a few days later, we'll follow this during the holidays, but a few days later, there will be a notice to Taiwan that the bill is adopted and the convention ratified and can come into effect January 1st. And during these proceedings, I commented on tax conventions more generally that can be problematic in certain instances, and that's why I encouraged the government in my speech at second reading to ensure that we take a closer look at our 92, 93 tax conventions, make sure that these are used for the right reasons and not become a way of facilitating tax evasion, as is the case with Barbados. With S4, we're talking about fighting tax evasion, but we know that in some situations, tax conventions, do facilitate tax evasion because corporations who are sufficiently implemented in that jurisdiction can claim residency status and claim the right to be taxed only once. In the case of Barbados, only in Barbados. And when they repatriate the funds here in Canada, they don't have to pay any additional tax, giving the excuse that they already paid tax that they owed. Same problem here. It's a very low tax rate, 0.5% if memory serves me, so that's completely unacceptable. But in a case like Taiwan or Israel, we can certainly have these conventions because they have a tax rate that's similar to that of Canada. So we see no problem there. But I want to remind the government that it is important to have some mechanism, an official mechanism, to review all our tax conventions periodically to ensure that the countries with which we have conventions continue to have similar tax rates to that of Canada, and that we don't end up with a problem that's even more serious and goes against the spirit of these conventions, which is to counter tax evasion. So I reiterate that in third reading, and I congratulate the government for the adoption of this bill that can come into effect, we hope, on January 1st, when the case of Taiwan, if all goes well. So I want to congratulate them and wish a Merry Christmas to all my colleagues, including you, Madam Speaker, once again, and hope to see you in great shape in 2017 so we can continue the good work we do here and can continue to work in cooperation with all parties in the House. Thank you, Madam Speaker. We'll see you again in 2017. Resuming debate. Member for Pierre Boucher, Les Patriotes Verchères. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'd like to take this opportunity to start out by saying that the Bloc Québécois intends to support Bill S4, the implementation of a convention with the countries listed in it. I mentioned this right away because I'll be rather tough on the government when it comes to their positions and their ways of doing things in tax conventions. And it's possible that I might not have time to conclude since we only have 5 minutes. I do want to mention, Madam Speaker, that it's more and more frequent that we see cases throughout the world, corporations and individuals that have income in more than one country because of globalization. That means that you need coordination. It's an additional challenge for various jurisdictions worldwide who must adapt to this and have good laws to counter the problems it can generate. This is why it's important to have good tax conventions, such as the ones we're discussing today. The government often tells us that these tax conventions avoid dual taxation or avoid tax evasion. Usually that's supposed to be the case, except that there's another thing that tax conventions allow, and that was stated. You avoid double taxation, there's often non-taxation that can occur, and that's the risk you run, and that's the problem that occurs, because sometimes people who profit from the system find deficiencies or loopholes and take advantage of the non-double taxation clauses to make sure they don't pay any tax, and that's what we have to combat. That's why we shouldn't support any tax convention. Not because it's a convention that it's a good one necessarily. I'll give you an example. Taxation is based on residency. For instance, I live in my riding of Pierre Boucher, in Boucherville, in Quebec, Canada for the moment at least. I pay my taxes in Quebec. I pay taxes in Canada, even though I don't like it. However, all citizens are supposed to pay taxes where they reside. The problem for an individual is quite easy to figure out where somebody lives. You look at their credit card, where their wife and children live, where their house is. You usually have a good idea where somebody lives. The problem is with corporations.
corporations don't always have to prove where they live. For example, they might reside somewhere, the shareholders are elsewhere, the CEO is elsewhere. So it's a vague situation, and we want to know what the reality is. And perhaps they're just doing it to take advantage of a system that is a bit that doesn't really work for taxation. So in Canada, it's the same as in Quebec. We are stuck with Canada in terms of taxation, and often we're stuck with Canada's decisions, even when we want to oppose them, like we did with regard to C-29. So we have to look at where the actual decisions are made, where do things actually happen for businesses, and that is where the businesses have to be taxed. So if a company registers in Barbados, well, that's one thing, but they actually have to have their residence there and conduct business there. In the United States, the rules aren't the same. A company is taxed where it is registered, which means that there's a problem because in Canada, where a company is supposed to be taxed where the board of directors is. So imagine if there's a company that says, well, I'm going to register in Canada, but my decisions will be made in the United States. So that means that for the Americans, it's an American country, and for America, it's a Canadian company because the decisions are made in the U.S. So it's really nonsensical, and we have to fight against that kind of thing. And it is situations like this that are usually fixed, but not always, because companies find new ways to not pay taxes, as we saw with the Barbados tax havens. My colleague here to my right, the member for Joliette, has tried to fight against that, but the members on the other side of the House have decided that it was fine. Barbados is home to a number of businesses that are there to evade taxes. So we hope that Bill S4 that puts in place tax conventions will ensure that this doesn't happen again. Merry Christmas to everyone, especially the banks. I might remind the member that he is not supposed to mention the name of other members here in the House. So just something to think about for 2017. Pursuant to the order adopted earlier today, Bill S4, a bill to implement a convention and an arrangement for the avoidance of double taxation and the prevention of fiscal evasion with respect to taxes on income, and to amend an act in respect of a similar agreement, is now deemed to have been read a third time and adopted.
Avant de terminer,
before wrapping up,
a very Merry Christmas and a Happy Holidays. Just remember, if you drink, don't drive. If you drive, don't drink. And I just want to thank everyone in this House, everyone on Parliament Hill that makes the functioning of the Hill just so smooth for us as MPs. I want to wish all the MPs un joyeux Noël et une bonne année.
A very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And I don't want to forget my constituents in my riding.
A very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year's, and to all Canadians at that. Thank you very much, and be safe. It being 5:04, pursuant to order made earlier today, the House stands adjourned until Monday, January 30th, 2017 at 11 a.m., pursuant to Standing Orders 28.2 and 24.1.